1, and we're now live.
Good evening, and welcome to the City Council meeting for August 3rd, 2021. We will begin by asking our City Secretary to call roll.
Councilman De La Garza.
Present.
Mayor Pro Tem Solis.
Here.
Councilwoman Scott.
Here.
Councilman Young.
Here.
Councilman Lofgren.
Here.
Mayor Bachnight.
Here. With all members present, we do have a quorum, and we'll continue this meeting. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. At this time, we'll take a moment of silence to allow each member of the City Council and those in attendance to prepare their hearts and minds and to appropriately do the business of our city. Thank you. So seating in the City Council chambers remains limited to allow for social distancing. And for those reasons, we continue to allow citizens participation through video conferencing. To learn about ways that you can watch and participate remotely, go to victoriatx.gov/talk-to-council. For those who wish to speak in person to the council during citizens communication and during a public hearing, we ask you complete a comment card and give it to a staff member. They're located right outside the door. Also want to welcome former Mayor Paul Polashek. It's good to see you here again. And don't worry, I know you're speaking, so I don't need a card. With that, announcements, Mr. Garza.
Good afternoon, Mayor and council members. We do have a few announcements for you this evening. To start off, I want to ask Christy Yoker to come up for a special presentation.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. I'd like to introduce Shannon Longoria. She is Keep Victoria Beautiful's board chair to announce our August winner.
Thank you, Christy. Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. As the chair of Keep Victoria Beautiful, I want to take a few moments to formally announce and present the August Keep Victoria Beautiful Beautification Award to Frost Bank. Frost Bank is a relatively new addition to our area that has significantly added to the aesthetic of the Victoria Mall facing Navarro. As a Texas chartered bank headquartered in San Antonio, Frost Bank is one of the largest banks in the United States that has chosen to invest in our area with the same standards expected in the metropolitan areas. Frost Bank was nominated by a local citizen of Victoria and scored based on the criteria located on our website at keepvictoriabeautiful.org. Our beautification committee discovered the building front is attractive and inviting with beautiful landscaping. The parking area is litter-free, which is difficult to do on a high-traffic street in a windy city such as Victoria. Frost Bank excelled in every category. So we want to express our gratitude for Frost Bank's commitment to a level of excellence that elevates the city of Victoria's community appearance. So please join me in congratulating Frost Bank as the recipient of the August Keep Victoria Beautiful Beautification Award.
Thank you. Next up, I do want to call up Chief Arredondo to make a special introduction for y'all this evening.
Good evening, Mayor, Council. Things falling down. It's an exciting time for me and the Victoria Police Department as I get to add an additional member to my command staff. We went through a restructure, and In doing so, I noticed that I needed a little more help to kind of divvy up some of the workload at the top so that we could still move the department forward with our strategy and things of that nature. But we also needed to make sure we were working on our crime initiatives, that we were reducing crime, and that we were looking at those quality of life issues for every neighborhood within the city. So I got with the city manager and I got a plan together, and we've had a great pool of candidates, and we ended up with 3, and then there was 1. And so I had the bailiff put one of these on your desk there so that you could read about his bio. He's got 40 years' experience, and that, of course, in 40 years ends up being at least a page bio, and I didn't want to read the whole thing. So at your reading pleasure, you have the bio there. But I'd like to introduce Chuck Young. Deputy Chief Young has a 40-year career with the Dallas Police Department, where he and I never worked under each other or around each other, but we were peers on the command staff at the Dallas Police Department. And I was always very impressed with his work ethic. He's a man of high integrity. He has a high drive, and I think he's a great addition to our police department. And he's going to bring a lot of insight to our patrol division and our investigations division. So I'll let Chuck give a little bit of.
Oh, feel free to go to the mic.
I'd like to thank the mayor, the council, and city manager for this opportunity, because it is a fantastic opportunity. An important part, like I said yesterday at my swearing in, I can't be any more appreciative of my wife, Natalie, who is back at the house in Prosper, which is where we lived, which is north of Dallas. Without her, without everybody involved in this process, I wouldn't be here, and I'm very, very, very fortunate, very thankful, and you'll get to know me, I hope, and I'm a pretty humble guy, and I appreciate this opportunity very much. Thank you.
Welcome. Welcome, Deputy Chief.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Briefly, I want to remind everyone that next Wednesday, August 11th, we will have the groundbreaking ceremony for Enchanted Gardens. That'll take place at 11 a.m. off of the property off of Ben Jordan, and so we encourage you to attend if you're available. With that, Mayor, those are the announcements that we have. I'm happy to transition into an employee recognition.
Please.
All right, so I want to briefly recognize our Communications Director, Ashley Strebel. Ashley recently was honored for earning her Certified Public Communicator certification from Texas Christian University's Bob Schaefer College of Communication, Strategic Communication Division. This graduate-level leadership training program builds successful and ethical leaders through experiential learning, theoretical instruction, application courses, case studies, and other interactive instruction in topics related to public relations, advertisement, and marketing. As part of the program, she developed a 3-year communications plan for the city of Victoria, which we're all very appreciative in general. Engaged in crisis scenario exercises and attended presentations by leading communications professionals. And so we would like to publicly thank her for her dedication to the city, to professional development, and really just give her a round of applause. And that's it.
Okay, then we're going to be into items from council. Is there anything that anybody has that is not specific on the agenda?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, I see Jason over there, and if we could get an update on the soccer complex for council and possibly the public as well.
Do we
You like that tonight, or?
so
We can't, I didn't know if there was an update right now, or if we can get into further.
sure. So I can tell you
Discussion.
that we are preparing a city manager's report,
Okay,
potentially for the next meeting
okay,
or the first meeting in September that would be inclusive of parks project updates. That one being one of them.
that's fine.
So if it's okay with you, we can do that as part of that formal presentation.
No, that's fine. I know
Okay.
that there's some decisions that need to be made with VYSO and getting fields done and where they're going to play this fall season. So was looking for kind of
Correct.
a timeline in that regard.
Okay. Absolutely.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you.
And we can send something to you via email as well for now.
Okay, that's perfect.
Okay.
All right, if there's nothing else, I need to get on my soapbox for just a minute and talk about vaccines. As you know, the COVID case count is increasing, and one way that you can prevent the spread is through vaccines. Now, I'm not mandating that, and no one's going to be mandating a vaccine. But I do want to share some statistics about vaccines to help people make a choice on whether or not they want to get it. Locally here, the best data we have right now is 89% of all the new cases are unvaccinated people. So that means 11% are breakthrough cases. People have had at least one shot of the vaccine. We're working on collecting data that we have for national so we can make it more relevant for local, but nationally, 93% of all those that are hospitalized with COVID are unvaccinated. And I recently read that since June or July, 99.965%, that's 99.965% of COVID-related deaths are by unvaccinated individuals. So I think those are pretty strong evidence on the effectiveness of vaccines. And I know it's a personal choice, but I want everybody that chooses not to get a vaccine to understand the risks associated with it. They're seeing a huge increase in the 25 to 40-year-old age group. This Delta variant is different from the previous ones. The previous transmission rate was like if you had COVID, you're likely going to transmit it to one person. This one, if you have the Delta variant, you might transmit it to 9. It's that much more contagious. So please take every opportunity to wade through the data on vaccines. If you have any questions about it, please contact your primary care physician or the public health department. But vaccines are a good way to stem the tide. Thank you.
Good information.
Thank you.
Anybody else?
No, I concur.
Okay, so we're going to go on into citizens communication. So at this time, I have a number of cards. We're going to start with Michael Vonderon. Good evening, Michael.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I was going to talk about permits, but I wanted to thank the chief of police. Two of his detectives has made some very good arrests in the trailer park, and I don't know these detectives. I just see them on Police to Citizens, so I can tell they're chasing drug dealers. One is Detective Soto and one is J.A. Garcia. They both made some arrests in and around the trailer park, and two of the people in the trailer park are in a state jail, and I will be contesting their parole, when it comes up, 100%. And just wanted to appreciate their hard work, and we have a case coming up this month from when they arrested the trailer park manager about 2 years ago, and I appreciate their hard work. And on permits, the trailer park owner, he isn't getting permits when he's parking trailer houses, and I want him to get permits. It is a law, he has to do it, and he knows he has to. He's a seasoned attorney and he owns lots of trailer parks, and the reason I want him to follow the laws and get a permit is because if there's no permit, they'll just park it in there and leave it, and I want them tied and anchored, according to the permit, because this is hurricane season. And he tried to sneak 3 trailers and RVs. He snuck 2 in and never did get a permit. There's 2 RVs, never got tied down, and a stick was holding it from moving, a big old stick. There's no way a building inspector would say, oh yeah, just put a stick there, that's fine. Don't park it on the concrete, just use a scissor jack and do it on the ground. You don't have to, and that's why I want them to get permits. It is a law, and and they were working on it without a permit, it's not just a civil offense. If you work on it without a permit, it is also a criminal offense too, and I would like the trailer park owner to do it properly. He owns trailer parks all over the state of Texas, so he knows better, and he is a seasoned attorney. So you kind of expect more out of an attorney than a regular person. But also, I would just like to thank all the police and stuff for all their work in the trailer park. And the two people are in Domingo's unit, and it has over 500 cases of COVID-19. So I figure when they get out of state prison, they'll probably have the COVID-19, so I'd recommend any police officers to wear a mask when they come through the trailer park. But thanks and have a good day. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Vonderum. Next up, we have Victor Mendoza.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I've put in an application for the Planning Commission, and I just wanted to come this evening and express my deep desire to be part of that organization. I don't know if you've had a chance to look at my application, and I am a licensed mechanical engineer in the state of Texas. I'm retired from Alcoa, worked 41 years, 4 months, and 12 days. And as a true engineer, I can give you the hours and the seconds too. And so what I did for Alcoa was engineering design, led engineering groups from the mechanical, electrical, and civil perspective, multi-million-dollar projects. And I'm very well aware of the TCEQ requirements, MSHA and OSHA. So I know I'd be a big benefit to the commission. And I look forward to your vote to accept me as one of the commissioners. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mendoza.
Oh, one other,
Yes,
if I
sir.
may. When I came here in 75, I was single. I met a young lady in 76, and we've been married for 45 years. And little did I know at the time that the young lady was neighbor to Miss Solis's parents' house. Thank you.
Thank you.
I saw him through the whole.
Dan Mikalinka.
Want everybody to wear a mask. Good afternoon, everybody, City Council, Mayor. I'm Dan Mikalinka, 304 Masters, in Victoria, Texas. Been here all my life. I want to put in my application for the Planning Commission again. I was fortunate enough to serve on the Planning Commission several years back, and it was a very interesting, and it was really fulfilling for me. I served my term, got off. I just retired after 40 years of service at the Invista site, and I like to devote my time now to if y'all choose to me to be on the Planning Commission. I'll devote my time. I think it's important that, you can be on the Planning Commission, but you got to attend the meetings. And I can tell you right now, I didn't miss any meetings all my time. And it's a very fulfilling. And I do appreciate the opportunity to have that chance to get on the team again. And so thank y'all. And I appreciate, Mayor, what you did to talked about COVID. It's a real thing out there, and we really need to be sensitive to that.
Well, it was a
Thank you.
pleasure serving on the Planning Commission with you.
Thank you.
Mr. Adam Daltrey.
Good afternoon, Mayor, Council. I want to thank everybody for allowing me to be here today. My name is Adam Daltrey. I'm looking for your appointment for the Planning Commission. I'm an 8th-generation Texan. My roots are deep in here in the local crossroads. So I graduated high school in Goliad, joined the military, was in the military for 15 years, got my bachelor's degree from Embry-Riddle University in airport management. While I was in the military, I was also able to be part of the airport task force that the military offered. I was able to meet with local officials, local city officials to come up with a comprehensive plan to determine if their particular city was available for a new airport. We worked jointly with 4 different services, as well with the FAA. So we'd come up with a comprehensive plan that see if that city would be affected by environmental, residential, and economic development. So we'd work jointly with the city council, mayor, county commissioners, and so forth to determine what rules or regulations to ensure that that is being implemented in that plan. So we'd submit that plan to the DOD and the FAA to determine if that's a viable area or location. I'm looking forward to being able to work with the council, with the city manager and his team, the planning commission and their team as well. I didn't put my name in for city council. I didn't feel like I was ready for it. Didn't feel I was, had the resources or education to get it. So while I'm preparing for planning commission, I'm also enrolling into the Citizens Academy, as well as the Citizens Fire Academy, as well as the Citizen Police Academy. So if I could get your appointment, if available, looking forward to being able to work with everybody. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Daltrey. Christopher Plyler.
Good afternoon. Thank you for the invitation to come speak. I would like to be appointed to the Planning Commission. And so just a little background on myself. In 2008, I moved here after I received the invitation to work for Raleigh McCoy. Thank you. I've lived here 13 years, and I kind of felt like this was kind of time to step up and be involved a little bit more with my community. I received my license practice architecture about a year ago. And so for 13 years, I've worked with the city and the county on many projects. And I feel like I have the knowledge and experience to be able to help the commission out, help the city out, and be more involved with community. So I appreciate any consideration.
Thank you, Mr. Plyler. And congratulations on getting that license. I know that's difficult. Mr. Joe Geisman.
Hello, well, I guess I'm as well going for the Planning Commission. A little bit of background on me. I was a mud engineer with Halliburton after getting my I&E degree from Victoria College. I worked my way up. I managed BHP and Hillcorp accounts in South Texas. I was in charge of over 40 engineers and 20 some odd rigs, managing multi-million-dollar accounts with that. I also worked out at Formosa Plastics, where I was certified in industrial firefighting, hazmat, and high-angle rescue training. I made a promise to myself and to my family that I was going to find a place for me here in the city of Victoria. Unfortunately, this go-around city council wasn't in the stars for me, but it was a great experience. I was able to learn a lot, meet a lot of new people. One thing I do bring that isn't in the form of degrees and qualifications on that level is everything I've done is I've always been very big into problem solving and troubleshooting and coming up with solutions on the fly. I know you have a little more time to think things through than what we did in my other field, but I know I could bring a lot of passion, of course, and a lot of, I do have a lot of skepticism and question a lot of things, but it's not to go against authority and to go against the grain. It's to make sure that what we're doing as a city is the right thing. And I believe we could use more people who like to question things and on that level. So I appreciate any consideration for this appointment. Thanks for letting me speak up here, and Godspeed to everybody.
Thank you, Mr. Geisman. Next up, Mrs. Cynthia Staley.
I'm not applying for planning commission. You're already on it. I'm already on it. But I do want to just say thanks for the opportunity to speak today. It's been a while since I've been here, January 2020. And I have notes because they told me I have 3 minutes, so I'm going to try really hard to stick to this. But what I have to say today is important, and I hope that I don't cry. So I'm Cynthia Staley. I'm president of Golden Crescent Habitat for Humanity. And since the last time I updated you, we've built a total of 55 homes, 15 in Victoria County and 40 in Refugio County. We also completed over 65 Hurricane Harvey repairs, and our disaster recovery work actually wraps up this December. One important lesson that we learned from doing all the Harvey and Uri repair work is that our community really needs to look at building resiliency. One way Habitat can facilitate increased resiliency is by helping homeowners earning less than 80% of the Victoria median household income maintain their homes in good repair. We're offering 0% microloans, and that program will launch in the fall. To build resiliency in Victoria, we also really need to look at increasing the supply of affordable single-family homes in our city. I need to congratulate you guys on the Enchanted Garden project. I mean, that is fabulous, and I know it's going to meet a significant need. I think I'm confused here. That's on Ben Jordan. What's the name of the one that you introduced over on the south side, the big one? Isn't that another one?
Hold on, 3.
There are 2 of them, right?
So currently, the Enchanted Gardens is the only one that is scheduled for groundbreaking.
Got it. Okay.
There are plenty of other projects that are conceptual and are in the works.
Oh, that's what I was thinking of. Excuse me. Anyway, congratulations on Enchanted Garden. We're all excited about that. But I'm here to talk about home ownership, so let's do that for just a second. We are actually looking at introducing what we're going to call H2, just as a nickname. We haven't named it officially, but it will be a completely different program, and these homes will be built in partnership with third-party lenders. We won't hold the mortgages on these homes. These houses will be 1,400 plus square feet. They're going to offer granite and tile amenities, and they'll sell for between $159,000 and $190,000. But to accomplish this, we really do need more land. Ideally, we'd be able to have a neighborhood ready to go to build multi-income homes. I know you know that the affordable homeownership situation in Victoria has worsened significantly over the past 18 months. And as the governing body who works with the city manager and the staff to set budgets, I know you want your employees to be able to buy homes here. So I want to real quickly just look at some city employee salaries that were available. And we're going to look at your first responder salaries. $30,600 for an EMT trainee to $68,500 for the most senior police officers. Now, those are this year's. I know there'll be something different in the fall. But if we just look at those and look at the old school method of 2 times 5, an annual salary to determine a home price, that means that folks falling into this income range are looking for houses priced between $110,000 and $170,000. I'm going to skip ahead here. On Trulia this morning, there were only 17 homes in that price range, and they're all over 50 years old. The city issued 234 new home permits last year. Only 5 of those would have been affordable for these employees that we're talking about here. And 2 of those were Habitat homes.
Ms. Staley, can you
Yes.
wrap it up in the next
Sorry. So
20
here's thank you
seconds?
very much. So I need you to hear my heart. What is important is that as the city council, I challenge you, encourage you to cast a vision. You've done a great job with the rental situation. Let's come back together with that workforce roundtable and focus on home ownership. I would love for you guys to cast a vision for what home ownership is going to look like in Victoria now and in the future. There's a lot of work that we need to do. Habitat can build affordable houses all day long, but we cannot be the only game in town. We can't do it by ourselves, and we need to increase our stock of starter homes. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Ms. Staley. And Mayor Polosic, thank you. I was not anticipating you getting through yours in 3 minutes based on
We can.
you sure?
I think so. And I
That's why I had you
apologize.
come up last.
I didn't fill out a card. I'm sorry.
No, I knew you were here.
Was not aware. And before I go any further, thank you, Mayor and Council, for your service. I know what it's like, right? So I appreciate it. I'm not here to ask for money or complain, so don't worry. You should have a copy of something like that. It's a PowerPoint. I apologize for the lateness. I think I emailed you, Jeff, and Jesus yesterday, and your city manager got copies to you.
Yeah, I forwarded it to you via email.
Okay. Even if you don't have it, it's okay. It's very brief. I am here
on behalf of Honor 361. You may have heard of that organization before. They've done fundraisers and things over the recent years. They're about a monument, building a monument, and I'm going to go through my presentation here. They're a 501c3, and they were organized in 2012. They're here in Victoria, and they have 5 board members. The objective of Honor 361 is to construct a monument dedicated to the residents of Area Code 361 who served in the War on Terror. A couple of stats I looked this afternoon, the War on Terror, Afghan, Iraq, it's roughly gone on 20 years, approximately. And overall, there's been 7,000 killed, 52,000 wounded. This is approximate. And at least 250,000 of these young men and women with PTSD issues. So it's a pretty significant conflict. It's something, unfortunately, I think the public grows accustomed to in the news. But while we're living our daily lives, these young men and women are over there doing the work of this country, So it's something that people get passive to, I guess you could say. The vision for the project began around 2011. And this, I'm going to, in quotes here, their primary goal has always been to ensure the human cost of the conflict is never forgotten, which is, I think, sums it up. Now, some of the board members are here. There's 5 of them. Did I say 4 earlier? There's 5 board members. I'm going to read out their names. They can stand up. Pablo Perez, I'll put them on the spot. Stay standing. Gilbert Ramon, is Gilbert here? He didn't show up. Dan Pooley and Kat Hickle and Chris Faust. Is Chris here? They didn't check their email, did they? Okay, so these 3 have worked significantly on this project over the years. And they're salt of the earth, good people. So when they asked me to come present for them, I couldn't say no. So thank you, guys. Continuing, and I'm not watching the clock. Just tell me to be quiet if I have to.
We turned it off.
Okay, thank you. So what we're requesting is that the city council give us permission to put this monument on public property, city property. And some of the biggest considerations when deciding that, because these guys came to me quite a while back, and I always caution them about put it somewhere where it will be maintained in perpetuity. You can't put it on private property. I mean, it just, over the years, as people come and go, it kind of like an old cemetery, sadly, sometimes gets neglected. But a monument such as this should be on a public property in a public space where it will be maintained. Something reasonably high visibility, a peaceful location perhaps that adds to the surroundings. And specifically what we'd like to see is you guys on a future agenda put a resolution granting permission to place the monument, maybe put a timeline on it, 2 years or 3 years, within that window, and we have a location and everything specific in that resolution. So that's really what I'd like to see. Whenever you get around to that, you'll have to work with some of the board members. But if you could put that on the agenda and get it passed, that way it's something that says, okay, that hurdle has been overcome. Because it obviously relates to funding, which is the next topic, is the current status. The estimate was about $70,000 to build and place a monument. I think that's an old estimate. It's probably going to be more. We're certainly not asking for anything from the city. That will be raised privately. About half of it has currently been raised. Obviously, having a firm location set for the monument will make it easier to raise the rest. So they have had fundraising efforts over the years, have been diverse. Battle for the Monument, that's a CrossFit type thing, right, guys? And I remember when I was in your position, Jeff, I would go to those and say some remarks. They were always well attended, a lot of people from out of town. They've had run bike events, softball games, tournaments, and organized hunt and other things. So fundraising is always a slow, tedious process. Do most of y'all have this? There is a picture of the monument there. You see that? Okay, good. There are 4 sides to it. There is a soldier on the monument. That's Marine PFC Colton Rusk. He was from Corpus Christi. He was killed December 6, 2010. And then you see the other sides there's room for the names of the deceased veterans. So it's very attractive. That probably black and white picture doesn't do it justice, but it's really, I think, a very nice monument. And then the location, I understand that this is subject to discussion and whatnot, but when, in talking to me over the years, I've always thought there in Riverside Park, up by the Rose Garden, if you see the picture that was supplied, it's kind of black and white. There's a circle in there. There's a really nice along the walking trail that goes by the Rose Garden. You are familiar with that? And there's the trees there, and there's a nice spot maybe along there. Everybody seems to settle to think that would be a nice spot. And I know the Parks Director and City Manager and all of you would probably need some time to think that through. You might have a better location, I don't know. But it doesn't flood, and it's reasonably visible. I would say that's a peaceful area, et cetera. So that we would like to see permission to place it there. And if that changes, perhaps you'll have something better that can come up in discussion. There is a list of names in the handout currently of the veterans in 361 area code that are deceased. There's 32 names there. I thought that was appropriate to at least include that in this presentation. Okay. That's it. Questions, anything while we got these guys here?
No, but I would just ask city manager and staff to work with the board. I would like to see a place for it. I don't know how y'all feel, but if there's some way we can fit it in with the master plans that we're incorporating different areas.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, guys.
Good to see you.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Foote?
Yes, Mayor. We have two Zoom attendees who wishes to address council. The
Okay.
first attendee is Walter Hawkna. Mr. Hawkna, you're allowed to speak. You're muted, sir. You need to unmute.
Hello?
We can hear you.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
You can, okay. Hi, Mayor Bucknight, ladies, and I'm sorry for that, I'm having a bad connection, I guess. But Mayor Bucknight, ladies and gentlemen of the City Council, City Management, Roads Department of Victoria, Texas, and those who help to get our message out. On behalf of the President's recently completed section of we are signed by us, thanking you all for listening to us, residents, and listening and responding to those of us residents that live in that section. If and when any of you go to federal government, please take those values with you. As I mentioned to Mr. ATN, now that the traffic is away from our front yards, except for the non-barrier curbing, I don't really care how fast the cars go. So are the flashing signs, other than the non-barrier curbing, I don't care about how fast the cars go. So are the flashing speed limit signs really needed? I guess that's up to the police department to use as a revenue generated. I wanted to be here in person, but the cards and comments from the residents says all.
He disconnected.
Well, thank you. We did receive some thank you cards from the citizens over there. They were dropped off at my office, and we passed them around and all looked at it, and thank you for those.
Okay, the next person who wishes to speak is a G. Lassery. You're allowed to speak.
Mr. Lassery?
Yes, sir. Mayor Bucknight and councilors, I'm applying for the position of city, basically planning commissioner position. And my name is Young Glacial. So let me briefly discuss my background, personal and academic background. I am currently vice president of the Missouri Valley Economic Association and also for professor of economics in the School of Business at UHB. And I've been at UHB for past basically over 20 years. My teaching and or administrative background were at University of Alaska Fairbanks, University of California, Santa Barbara, Texas Tech, Texas State University, San Marcos, and Welland Baptist University. So basically, I have a large number, basically good experience with academics and different way of teaching classes and so on. And in regard to my personal background, and if you don't mind, I grew up as a military dependent in such places as Hawaii, Japan, Korea, Ethiopia. So I finished my high school in Ethiopia and finished part of my elementary and junior high school in Oahu, Hawaii. Now, although they have received a degree in economics, both bachelor, master, and PhD in economics, I also studied statistics and urban regional planning. Now, your question that you may want to know is why am I applying for a planning commission? Now, I am currently 66 and I will be 67 years old this month. And I plan to retire next year. Just like the planning commission, I need a good plan in divvying up my free time, similar to a good planning for the city. Planning is a proactive process to establish goals and policies for directing and managing future growth and development for the city, is not? So I'm doing the same thing for my future. As an example, sign plan should address such issues as location of growth, housing needs for the city, and also environmental protection if certain policies are approved. Moreover, planning helps account for future demand for services, including sewers, roads, and fire protection. That means money. Means that we need money to have those type of plans. Basically then, a sign planning saves money, set the ground rules for economic development, and improves economic development and quality of life. I would like to be part of that process starting this year and after retiring next year and forth. Now, I give it one, since I moved around quite a lot, including Florida and Alaska, California, and in Texas. So let me briefly give.
Excuse me, we have a 3-minute limit on citizens' comments. Can you take maybe 10 seconds to wrap it up? Hello?
Did he disconnect?
You can, if you want to wrap it up in 10, 15 seconds, that'd be great.
I believe he's still talking, but it doesn't realize it's muted.
Oh.
Is he muted because I'm not hearing anything?
Yeah, well, yes. So once I muted him to allow to speak, he's muted, and now I guess he's not. I'm sure if he can hear us. So.
Oh, carry on.
Okay. Well, thank you for attending virtually. Is there anybody else that wish to address the city council? Seeing none, we'll close citizens' communication and go into items with public hearings.
Item C1 is a resolution adopting the city's Community Development Block Grant, or CDBG 2021-2022 one-year action plan, and authorizing the city manager to submit all required documentation for fiscal year 2021-2022 CDBG program to the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I have just a short presentation. If you remember, we went over this, our proposed budget at the June 1st council meeting. And so I just have a short recap of where those funds are proposed to go. And this is the Plan Year 2021 Annual Action Plan that we're asking for approval tonight that corresponds with our Fiscal Year 22 that starts in October. Okay. So again, we're asking approval tonight for the 2021 Annual Action Plan. We were granted $627,688 through HUD as our entitlement grant. Our proposed budget is $125,537 for administration costs, which pays salaries and supplies and things of that nature.
Ms. Fulgham?
Yes.
Just one quick thing. Mr. Foote, none of our monitors can switch over. It puts our monitors to sleep. I want to continue on with this presentation. We can all look over our shoulder, but I know when we get to some of the later things, it would be nice to have them.
It also is included in the AIM, the last several pages, maybe another option to see it. So again, our administration is approximately $125,000, and that's 20% of our entitlement. We are recommending allocating $125,000 to Affordable Housing Program, which is a roof and rehabilitation program that we are proposing to partner with Habitat. So how that partnership will work, and there will be after approval tonight, later we'll have to come back to council for approval of a memorandum of understanding and contract with Habitat for Humanity, but Habitat would perform all of the legwork for us as far as qualifying all of the applicants, writing the scope of works, doing a lot of the inspection work that's required for the environmentals, turn that over to us to do the contracting, and so it would be a true partnership with Habitat. And that roof and rehabilitation program is roofs, and then also to make repairs to eligible repairs to homes. So windows, the building envelope, and then aging in place repairs such as bathroom conversions and wheelchair ramps. Then we are proposing approximately $67,000 for our neighborhood programs, which continues to be our demolition. If you remember from our code enforcement presentation, we continue to have a lot of Building Standards Commission cases doing a lot of demolitions, and this really helps supplement those programs when we have people that are willing to apply and eligible to apply. And then we are proposing $215,800 for public facilities and $93,500 for public service activities, which is capped by HUD to be 15% of our entitlement. So our 2021 public facility recommended funding is $15,800 to Boys and Girls Club to finish out and do some exterior trim paint repairs, just the blue portion of their building. They have some paint that's, the blue paint is flaking, and so $15,000 will fix that for them. Then $100,000 to Gulf Bend for their clinic renovation at their facility, and another $100,000 to Perpetual Help Home to do upgrades to the property at 401 South Depot. The legal department is currently working with the state for a public benefit lease, so we're working on acquiring that. So we have rights to then sublease it to Perpetual Help Home for a daycare rehab, and using $100,000 of CDBG funds to go towards that. Our 2020 public service activities, agency recommendations are as you see on the screen. So Boys and Girls Club, their Power Hour Summer Camp, we are recommending $10,000. The Community Action Committee, one of their senior services care program is $10,000. Another program for them is Meals on Wheels, it's $7,500. Then the Food Bank Kids Weekend Meals Program, formerly known as the Backpack Program, for $15,000. Golden Crescent CASA training, volunteer training, is $7,500. Gulf Bend Center Wellness Community, that'll help pay for a staff person, $22,000. Meals on Wheels Victoria for one of their programs, $14,000, and then their cafe to go meals, same Meals on Wheels Victoria Senior Center agency is $7,500. And
Ms. Fulgham, if I could just tell council that you were nice enough to include the PowerPoint in the actual write-up, and so within our agenda, we do have the PowerPoint.
And so our recommended funding for the PSAs are $93,500, and our 15% max is just right there at that $94,000, so we're slightly under. So what we're asking for tonight is approval of the annual action plan. This is an item that requires a public hearing. Tonight ends the public comment period. We have had a public comment period open this last month, have not received any public comments, and then we must submit the 21 annual action plan to HUD by August 16th to meet the statutory deadline that HUD sets. And I'd be happy to answer any questions.
How many people apply for each category? And
So it varies greatly. This year, we were able to fund in some capacity everyone that applied. There was one agency that applied, but their program that they had submitted actually didn't meet the guidelines. And so we tried to work with them to change the program. And they said, we're just going to withdraw our application because we don't want to degrade our program to meet the qualifications of HUD. And so this year we were actually able to fund everyone that applied in some capacity. You can see on this chart what they requested versus what we recommended. We generally are very successful in always giving something. It may not be the full amount.
What is the difference between the home delivery meals and the cafe to-go meals?
Home delivery people that are strictly homebound, cafe, the people that are to go, they have some ability to get out, but they're still, income restricted and need that supplemental food.
So where, do they just go to any restaurant?
Oh, no, it's to the senior center, our
Okay,
former senior
that's what I
center. They have
thought.
rebranded and changed their name to Meals on Wheels.
Oh, okay, I thought that's what it was, but I wasn't too sure. And the backpack program for the kids, is that going to cover just like during school, during the summer, or is that, that doesn't seem like a lot of money, that's why I'm asking.
It only provides 3,000 meals. So generally it's through the school year and they work with VISD. I believe they will go through Kids Connection, but they divvy up those 3,000 meals to as many kids as they can throughout the year.
can the Salvation Army apply for anything?
Absolutely. There are rules on requiring, worship. They have to provide services to everybody. Any sort of worship activity cannot be mandated or a requirement. But as you can see, we have faith-based organizations that have applied and do apply, Perpetual Help being one of them.
You may have said this, but what was the cost of, what is that program? I'm not really seeing a good description.
They use that to train their volunteers. And those volunteers should be able to assist 40 children based off the number of the training materials and how many volunteers they can train with that funds, and then how many children they'll be able to help.
Any other questions for Ms. Fulgrim? Thank you. At this time, I'm going to open a public hearing on item C1. Seeing no one coming to comment, I'll close the public hearing and entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second.
Got a motion and a second. Did you catch that? Okay. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call for the question. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Consent agenda.
Item D1 is the adoption of minutes for the July 13th, 2021 special meeting and the July 20th, 2021 regular meeting. Item D2 is an ordinance for the annexation of 2 tracts of land totaling approximately 12.056 acres of land owned by Golden Crescent Holdings LLC and Ben Streef, Paige Streef, Bruce Yank, and Darla Fox, and that item is on second and third reading. Item D3 is an ordinance amending Chapters 5 and 9 of the Victoria City Code by adopting the 2021 International Building Code Series as amended. This item is on third reading. Item D4 is a resolution approving a variance to Section 21-55C2 for the property located southwest of the intersection of Northwest Sacklands Parkway and FM 236 in order to allow the rebuilding of a private driveway into a public roadway intersection for a proposed local street located within the subdivision. Item D5 is a resolution approving a variance to Section 21-58D and 21-59D for a property located at 3627 Salem Road and 52 Shell Road in order to allow the property owners to continue using on-site water wells and wastewater disposal systems to create 2 platted single-family lots in their current parcel configuration. Item D6 is a resolution approving a memorandum of understanding with Victoria County for the 2021 Edward Brynn Memorial Justice Assistance Grant, or the JAG program. Item D7 is a resolution appointing Gilbert P. Reyna Jr., CPA, as the representative to perform the no new revenue effective tax rate and voter approval, or the old rollback tax rate calculations. Item D8 is a resolution authorizing the publication of the notice of meeting to vote on tax rate. Item D9 is a resolution scheduling the public hearings on the 2021-2022 budget. And item D10 is the delivery of the certified tax roll to the mayor and city council.
Thank you. Have a motion?
Second.
Thank you. All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? Thank you. Item E1.
Item E1 is a resolution confirming the city's program for hot funds for outside agencies.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Thank you for having me here this evening. I have a brief presentation on our annual hotel occupancy tax grant process, and we'll be presenting the total amount to be approved by council for the allocations to the applicants. Just a brief timeline on the process thus far. In mid-July, on July 12th, we did open applications to community organizations and advertise those applications being open. In late July, we did hold 4 applicant workshops, one on the 14th at 6 p.m., one on the 20th and one on the 22nd at noon, and then one on the 27th at 6 p.m. So we made those available at noon hours as well as evening hours to our applicants, which we closed those applications on this past Friday, July 30th at 5 p.m. Central Standard Time. Early August, we will be meeting a Hot Funds Subcommittee of the Tourism Advisory Board to make recommendations to council in late August, council to consider a resolution awarding funds to outside agencies, and then in early October, the funding agreements become effective. The amount we will be recommending to council this year was the amount that was approved last year for $135,000. That is consistent with previous years and accommodates the available fund balance and expected revenues. Again, this is the total amount that will be made available to the applicants through the review process. And at this time, I can answer any questions you might have.
Is it my understanding that the original Hot Funds Committee that the City Council put together, that they're no longer aboard?
Yes.
They
Yes.
are or they're not?
They are not, no ma'am. That is at the, it is now being overseen by a subcommittee of the Tourism Advisory Board. So any of those Tourism Advisory Board members who would not be applying for hot funds, so there's no conflict of interest, would be serving on that subcommittee.
Okay, were they made aware that they were not going to be meeting anymore and becoming part of that committee?
Yes, ma'am. I did receive a call from a previous committee member and discovered that they were not made aware of that, which was an oversight on our part, and I apologize for that. I spoke to him. So those committee members, we have just had one reach out to us, but was understanding, but they were not given any formalized notice. I apologize. Yes, ma'am.
They weren't very happy.
Okay.
I got the complaint, so I think that that was a slip on your part. And I got the, brunt for it, so, please be careful.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, do we have any other questions? If not, we'll entertain a motion for item E1.
Adopt E1.
Second.
Got a motion and a second to approve item E1. All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. All right, item E2.
I apologize, my microphone wasn't on. I'll read item E2 so that April can move to the microphone. Item E2 is the appointment of members to the Planning Commission.
Good evening, Mayor and council members. I have a brief presentation, but it's all information that you guys have seen many times before when we appoint to the Planning Commission, because I want to move forward with your permission to actually move on to the appointments. So we do have 3 vacancies available. All the vacancies are for full terms, so they would be for 3 years through August 2024. We have 1 commissioner who is no longer serving, and the other 2 commissioners are not eligible for reappointment due to term limits. So we had 10 applicants, and the majority of them spoke this evening, expressing their desire to serve, and that's a great turnout. I'm very proud of them for coming out and expressing their desire to serve. We got a really good applicant pool this time. So before the meeting, we placed ballots on the dais for each of you. If you'll please put your name on the ballots and circle the 3 names of the people that you wish to appoint to the Planning Commission. The top 3 vote getters will be the ones that we move forward with. If there's a tie, we will ask you to vote again. So you'll see that there's several ballots there. And once you're done, if the ballots will be available for review in my office, and Angelina will come up and pick up the ballots as soon as you're ready.
I want to take this time to thank everybody that applied for this. If you're not one of the 3, please, we have plenty of other boards and commissions that need membership. And please step forward again if you do not get appointed tonight. But wow, fantastic, and thank you all.
Just a moment while we tally those votes. Okay, so after tallying the votes, Victor Mendoza received 5 votes, and then we had 3 people that received 3 votes. So we'll vote again between those 3 people, and those 3 people are Mr. Mikalinka, Mr. Daughtry, and Mr. Glacier. So if you could choose again between those and pick 2 of those people, please.
Say them again.
Sure, it is Mr. Mikalinka, Dan Mikalinka, Mr. Daughtry, and Mr. Glacier. If you'll pick 2 of those, please.
Thanks.
So out of those 3, the top 2 vote getters were going to be Mr. Daniel Mikalinka and Adam Daughtry. So the resolution would state that we'd be appointing Victor Manuel Mendoza, Daniel J. Mikalinka, and Adam Daughtry.
Thank you, Ms. Hilbert. Anybody like to make a motion?
I make that motion.
Second.
All right. We have a motion and a second for Mr. Mikalinka, Mr. Daughtry, and Mr. Mendoza. Once again, I want to thank everybody for their application. It was a phenomenal group to choose from. And thank you for your willingness to serve. So at this time, all those in favor? say
Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. And item E3.
Item E3 is a resolution approving a contract with Fun Abounds Incorporated for solar lighting installation in city parks in an amount not to exceed $75,000.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I have a really brief presentation for you tonight. And the majority of this is in the packet as well. Just a quick project background. So the parks were identified and recommendations were made based on the amount of funding from CDBG. The total amount of funding that we have is $75,000. Out of that $75,000, we're looking at installing 10 solar lights. 3 of those lights would end up going into Pine Street Park. The remaining 7 would go over to Queens City Park. An RFP was published on May 31st. We had the bid openings on June 23rd and with the review committee. And we had selected Fun Abounds, and they have 100 days to complete the project. So we're looking at a completion date of November 19th. Just really quickly, solar lights that we do have, we're very familiar with them. We have about a dozen of them or so throughout the parks. These lights in particular work with no sun for 3 days. And then some of the lifespan on the equipment, as you can see listed below, solar panels is 20+ years, LED fixtures up to about 50,000 hours. And the biggest thing that we've actually had to worry about is just the batteries. These are the locations in Queenie City Park where the 7 lights would be going. So really around the outer perimeter. So 3 on the top, 2 on the bottom, and then 2 that are close to the pavilion and the sidewalk. And then at Pine Street Community Park, we have the 3 that would be on East Street. And basically, it's right around the pavilion, or if the playscape, if you will, and the basketball court. So just trying to shed a little bit of light over there. With that, I'll take any questions that you may have.
Briefly, I just want to add that this effort has really been a long time coming. Staff has been in communication with residents and stakeholders that live or work around these areas. And the lack of lighting is something that has come up with the police department, with us, about potentially contributing to some of the issues in those areas. And so this lighting hopefully will do more than just light the park so that people can use it in the evenings, but hopefully create a safer environment that also makes it easy for our police department to patrol the area and hopefully keep some of the bad behavior that might be taking place in those areas and hopefully helping with that cause.
Is there any hopes in the future with more funding to get more lights around Pine Street Park?
Yes, sir. That's something that we would like to, we've talked about it, just including in the budget, not just waiting on CDBG funding.
Great.
Yes, sir.
How does this pricing compare to what we would have put up normally that wasn't solar powered? Just a regular light stand with LED lights?
That's a really good question. I can tell you what we did with Fun Abounds. Their prices, what we've seen was about $8,000 for the solar lighting. With this project, they were able to bring it down to about $7,500 for us. So in relation to what you're saying, I'm not too sure. I'd have to look at that and get an answer for you.
That's just curiosity. I know you'd have to pull electrical wire and do everything else and go underground, and so.
Yeah. Solar's the way to go now.
Maybe.
LED at least.
All right, thank you.
Yes, sir.
No further questions. Motion from someone?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? Thank you. At this time, we're going to take a 5-minute break. We're going to see if we can get Mr. Foote to work his magic for us, and then we're going to go into the city manager report and then come back and do E4. Okay? All right, we're going to take a break at 6:09, and we'll be back here at 6:15. Meeting back to order. You ready? Okay, I'm on. We're calling the meeting back to order at 6:15 PM. And as we stated before, we're going to have Mr. Garza do his presentation before we take up item E4. Mr. Garza?
All right, good afternoon, Mayor and council members. I have a short 1-hour presentation to go through this evening, but I'll try and make it shorter than in June because hopefully you've had some time to take advantage of some of the things that we've put in place to try and make. Nothing's happening. I was trying to plan that out super smooth to be able to transition that, I hope you've taken advantage of our increased accessibility, and it just didn't work. It just didn't work. Yeah, apparently. In any case, one of the big things that, of course, we've been working on over the last couple of years is trying to enhance the way that we go about putting together our budget. So to find that compromise between something that helps staff work more efficiently and more productive and make it, quite frankly, just an easier process for everyone involved, but that at the end of the day can also be a product that is easily accessible to you and the public. And so what I want to do briefly is similar to what I went in June, or similar to what I did in June, which was walk you briefly through where this information is available online, because this is definitely something that has actually improved significantly even from the time that we showed it in June. And so hopefully you've had some time to check it out, and we encourage the public who might be listening to go to our website and be able to take advantage of this. So, this is not going smooth at all.
It's gonna take an hour.
Now you know
Yeah.
how we feel, though.
I'm sorry?
Now you know how we feel, though.
Yeah, this is true. So in any case, this is the front page of our website, victoriatx.gov. You'll notice there is a button there for fiscal year annual budget. This will take you to a page where we have information related to our officially proposed budget, as well as our 5-year CIP that council signed off on in May. If we wanted to take a deeper dive into the proposed budget, we can click that link and it'll take you to a brand new overview of the budget. This overview did not exist in this simplistic form back in June. And so staff has done a tremendous amount of work trying to put it in a format that's much easier to follow. One of the things that we also did was we made more easily accessible and easier to find what we refer to as the transmittal letter, which I also emailed you a copy of, and you have a physical copy of in front of you, which is in essence an executive summary of the proposed budget. And so this 10-page document will walk you through the details of how this budget compares to last year, as well as talking about some of the budget highlights in the various funds. And so I encourage you to review that and encourage anybody in the public to go through that. For those that are interested in something that is more comprehensive and go into the details of, various departments or whatnot, we also created a budget overview here that also facilitates finding those topics of interest to you. And so, for example, if you're interested in revenues, you could click revenues, take a deep dive. If you were interested in trying to learn about the governmental funds versus enterprise funds, you could do that here as well. And really, I'm not going to go through in detail, obviously. And one of the neat features that staff added was actually these buttons at the bottom so that it makes it easier to return to previous page or go to next page. And so it's just much easier to navigate. And so we're very proud of this product. And I want to thank the finance team publicly for their work. Obviously, that includes Gilbert, it includes Laura, it includes Wesley. And so they're all here tonight, and so I want to thank them and give them a round of applause for their hard work in this process. It's all out there, and so we encourage you and the public to check it out. So take me back to the PowerPoint, please. All right. So one of the elements that also we incorporated last year, that we started doing last year, as a way to make it even easier to talk about the great things that we do, is we created a budget highlights document. And so this is even shorter than the transmittal letter, and it's obviously more graphic oriented. And so we are in the process of finalizing this budget highlight document that will finalize throughout this month as we finalize the budget with you, that will also serve as an easy access to find out what's going on with our revenues and some of the big expenditures. And so this is also something that we're trying to get more in the habit of doing. And so this PDF would be something that would be available on the website. And for any of you that may want to use it for any speaking engagement that you might have, this would be the appropriate flyer or PDF to utilize for that exercise. In a nutshell, our proposed budget for fiscal year 22 can be summarized under these categories. Of course, we'll talk a little bit about economic recovery because obviously with the pandemic, there was some budget impacts to us last year. And so we'll talk a little bit about the recovery of that. Like every budget, we have a balanced budget. And I do want to add a note there that when we refer to a balanced budget, we're referring to the core base of the budget, general fund, and some of those elements. Obviously, our budget is all inclusive and includes not only an operating budget but a capital budget, and so it's not uncommon that every budget has expenditures that are higher than revenues. And so it's important to note that when we refer to a balanced budget, we're referring to the operational component aspect of it as opposed to the whole budget, because the CIP throws it off. As you know, there are projects that carry over, there are projects that we save money for and end up taking a while to develop. And so in this particular budget, we have a UHV project that is in the CIP, that money is not even coming from us. And so it all contributes to the expense side. Compensation and pay program, we'll talk briefly about that because that's a big story. And almost $2 million in our budget is related to some type of pay program. And so that's obviously a big priority for us. We'll talk briefly about grant programs, and specifically I'll digress a little bit to talk about the American Rescue Plan Act, just to kind of piggyback off of where we left off at the last time we spoke about it. CIP, we've talked about it, and we'll talk about it a little some more this evening, going into some specifics on what some of those projects are for fiscal year 22. We'll talk a little bit about the appraised values and how that creates an opportunity to lower the property tax rate. And of course, the health plan fund, which is something that we specifically have pointed out over the last couple of years as being a concern, is now finally beginning to rebound. And so we'll share that with you as well. Overall, our proposed budget equates to $166 million. This is just a graphic representation of how that's all made up. Obviously, as you know, the general fund is our biggest fund out of the various funds that we have with the city. That general fund is highlighted on the right with what we refer to as the budget wheel, which shows the revenues around the outer edges with the expenditures in the middle. This is the fund that we'll spend a little bit of extra time in, since this is where our operational departments are funded out of. And this is, of course, where property taxes and sales tax predominantly goes into. And so it's always the fund that necessitates, and rightfully so, the most attention. Well, that doesn't look pretty.
Nothing went wrong.
We worked so hard to come up with images that were pretty, and that didn't work either. Hopefully that just means that it's just going to get better after today. So on the revenue side, so today's presentation, I want to focus it on talking about what's changed compared to the last time that we spoke about this. As you know, back on June 22nd, we presented a trial budget where we very specifically went through where we were with the budget. Departments had an opportunity to present their individual departmental budgets. And so hopefully that provided you a great overview of just the specifics of how things might be changing for the different departments. Today, we'll focus big picture. And obviously through the information that we've provided, hopefully you get a chance to go through the specifics of that. In June, we proposed a budget that was $151.2 million. Now we're proposing $153. This is the revenue budget specifically. That net increase of $1.8 million. And if you're wondering what's that $1.8 million made up of, you're asking the right question, because we have a slide that tells you exactly where that $1.8 million came from. I do want to call specific attention to the circles that have the stars, because those are the ones that make up the bulk of that amount. One of the things that we did not get a chance to talk about in June was the Stabilization Fund. You may recall that Council established a Stabilization Fund last year as a way to transfer funds that we might have left over at the end of a year or at the beginning of a year to be able to build up a pot of money that then council would have the discretion to apply that towards whatever needs might come up in the future. When that stabilization fund was created last year, it was not created with a seated amount. And so this $1 million would be the first amount that we would transfer into the stabilization fund. And in the transmittal letter, there's a whole section in a paragraph that very specifically talks about the stabilization fund and what it could be utilized for. That verbiage came straight from the policy that council adopted last year. But in any case, that $1 million is in there. On the general fund side, you'll notice that it was broken out specifically. I won't go into those details, but obviously with having a couple of more months for staff to put this together, there's a couple of things that are being improved to be more accurate and as accurate as possible. And so obviously with municipal court picking back up, we've adjusted that slightly. We also, on the property tax rate, and we'll hit on that, we're also expecting to receive some additional property tax revenue compared to what we had proposed in June. You'll also notice that on the utility fund side, there's a red, and that's the only red on there, which is a decrease in water sales. That's specifically related to the fact that it's rained a lot this summer, and it's rained a lot the last 2 summers. And so I think Gilbert finally got to the point where he said, you know what, maybe we just need to budget assuming that it's just gonna rain a lot every summer now. And so at first, after it happens a year, you think it's a fluke, it'll rebound. Well, it's been 3 summers now that it's rained this much, and so we're adjusting the water sales slightly. The big other star at the bottom is the debt fund for taxes. One of the things that you hear us talk about is leveraging some of that additional revenue to pay off or redeem some bonds early to create some debt capacity, and so that's reflected on there as well. And some of the others are just very minor things that we needed to adjust. One of the things that we do throughout this process is sometimes, we're not perfect. And so sometimes there are things that we intended to include in the budget in the presentations in June. And after further scrubbing, we realized, we forgot to, we talked about it, but we forgot to include it. And I'll single a couple of those things out. This right here is just an overview of a different format to show you the increase in revenue budget. This $14 million increase is in contrast to the original budget for fiscal year 21, which would have been the budget that was adopted in September of last year. And so you notice that $14 million increase, and we've tried to summarize and show in different ways where that's made up of. And so you notice that on the governmental funds, there's some taxes associated with that, and some of the other things that we've talked about related to CIP transfer, which I'll get to, as well as the creation of the Stabilization Fund, the enterprise funds, as well as the internal service funds. We can go in as detail as you'd like, but for now, we're keeping it big picture. If you're interested, or for anybody that's interested in seeing a deeper dive into that 14 million, we also put together this slide that takes a slightly deeper dive. And so, for example, on the taxes front, you'll notice that the taxes in itself is almost $3 million, and that's a combination of sales tax, property tax, and motel tax all combined. And you'll notice that municipal court fees, while we increased it from June, it's still a decrease from what was adopted this time last year. And so we're still trying to figure out long-term what that's gonna look like. I don't wanna necessarily go through these one by one, if that's okay. But I will leave it up there for a second for those that wanna view it. And of course, if at any point you have questions, Gilbert will answer all your questions. Okay. Specifically on sales tax, this is where we talk about the economic recovery. We've talked about it. This was obviously a concern for us when the pandemic hit because nobody really knew what impact that was going to have on people's habits of shopping and things of that sort. And so you'll notice that we took a hit. And so you'll notice that in fiscal year 21, we budgeted 15.5 or close to 15.5. And we are now budgeting for proposed fiscal year 22, 17.1, which is nearly a $1.7 million swing. You'll also notice that what's projected for the remainder of this fiscal year is actually higher than what we're proposing for next year. That's intentional because even though we are all hopeful that this continues to trend upward, there's still a lot of uncertainty out in the community and just in the business environment. Obviously, there's been a lot of funds that have been injected into the economy stemming from Congress that typically translate to people spending money. And so with things changing with unemployment, with some of those checks that came from the stimulus funds, and all of that changing over the next several months, we don't want to take a chance. And so we'd rather take a conservative approach. And even that $1.7 million swing, that's still sufficient to obviously cover our immediate goals and our future goals as well. And hopefully this time next year, we are able to budget that higher amount and have a positive conversation about how things continue to trend upward. But as Mayor Bachnight mentioned earlier, there are some changing circumstances out in the community related to COVID that nobody knows what things are going to look like 6 months from now. Very briefly, I want to talk about the property tax rate. In June, we showed you an estimate of where we thought we would be with the increase in appraised values, and it's turned out to be actually higher than what we presented in June. And so what we show as of today, or as of when we receive the certified tax rolls, is that net taxable appraised values would increase 8.7%. On the right-hand side, we show a table showing the last 5 years to give you a sense of just what the last 5 years have looked like as it relates to that. And obviously, where we are now is different. We are seeing an increase in appraised values in two categories that I want to focus on: residential and commercial. You may recall that last summer I spent, and Gilbert spent, some extra time putting slides together to show that we had this interesting thing going on where we had residential values going up and business commercials going down. And we've been talking for over a year about how those things should probably be better aligned. And so we're certainly pleased to see that both residential and commercial are trending together in the same direction. That to me is a good sign that our community is growing and that the economy is recovering, and that just overall we're doing better as it relates to this process. Now, some of that is probably attributed to the net increase, but as you can see, there's other factors in that as well. One of the items that you approved under consent was the official delivery of the tax rolls, and so some more specifics are attached to that aim. But here you go. Net increase 8.7%. That creates an opportunity for us, though, as you know, to be able to lower the tax rate and be able to generate some additional revenue. Back on June 22nd, when we presented the trial budget, we initially proposed a tax rate of 0.5844. We had also at the time had shown an option that had actually increased that to about roughly 0.59. That additional option was to redeem some bonds to be able to create some debt capacity. Since then, I've had an opportunity to have some conversations with all of you, and there is interest in redeeming some bonds. And what we're proposing today that you consider doing is approving, if you will, the process for a tax rate to be at 0.5882, which is still roughly 2.5, well, it's 2.3 cents lower than where we are today. This presents a very unique opportunity for us that I'm not sure we'll see again, because I don't think we should count or expect that every single year we'll have an NTAV increase of over 8%. And so we want to try and maximize the benefit to us associated with that, while also being sensitive to the taxpayers, obviously. And so finding that happy medium, and we think we've achieved that with the proposed tax rate. Again, that lowers it close to 2.5 cents. In that particular option, you'll notice at the bottom highlighted in yellow that this allows us the ability to transfer $500,000 to redeem bonds. And if you think back to the one slide where we had circles and there was one star close to $500,000 that was for redeem bonds, that's what this is. And that has the ability or the potential for us to create $7.5 million in debt capacity. And in order to graphically show it, we thought, well, let's just show it to you the way that we've shown all of the debt capacity in previous conversations. And so the last time we talked to you about debt capacity and CIP was in May, which is the graph on the left. And by the way, this is strictly GO and CO. This revenue or the redeeming of bonds has nothing to do with the utility side and those revenue bonds. This is strictly GO and CO. And so you could see how graphically we show that increase in 7.5 in 2024, just to give you a sense of how that would impact this graph or this table that hopefully you've become accustomed to seeing. However, as I've always mentioned, oops, I forgot that one. That one's important. One of the things that we also started doing last year was trying to get a sense of what that impact is to residents. And so this was something that we started incorporating last year to a greater degree. And so this is simply to illustrate what that budget impact, if you will, would be to the resident if we went with the proposed tax rate. And so you'll see that for, say, $200,000 property, that annual tax increase would be $24. This takes into account a 6% increase in their appraised values. So it's important to note that everybody's situation is completely different. There is no way for us to stand up here and scientifically show what that budget impact would be for every single resident in Victoria. So we have to just make some assumptions. And so, and so some property values went up, 3, 4, 5, 6%. Some went up 10, 15%. And so again, this is simply just to illustrate an example of what this would look like for somebody whose property values went up 6%. They would see, and at $200,000, they would see an additional annual contribution, if we can call it, to property tax of $24. Yeah, annual contribution, that's a good one, right?
I like
it. Yeah.
Could you go back a slide?
Yes, ma'am.
So with the increased capacity that you've shown in '24,
right,
just for my edification, that isn't necessarily in '24. Could that be available in '23 or be available in '22?
We can move things around, but there would be pros and cons to that. Because remember that part of our strategy was to also try and redeem bonds to have some interest savings. And so that we can always move things and move things around in order to match our needs. But there would also be a conversation about, okay, if we move some of that up. So for instance, a classic example is for 27, right, the 54 million. If we move some of that up, we may not necessarily see as much interest savings as we had originally presented. But that might be okay, right? Because if needs are there, then we need to spend the money, then we spend the money. But this flexibility is intended to show you at least graphically what that looks like. And I know Gilbert pulled up his mic to say something too.
What growth percentage are you using for 2023, 2024?
1%.
1%? Yeah. To go back to Ms. Scott's question about that, to speak back, Mr. Garza's comment is that the reason why we selected 2024, as you recall in the CIP, that's when we started doing the design and everything else on the streets, whatever the case might be, and the actual construction, whatever happens in 25, and forward. So you could move that. I just picked 24. Could you do 23? Yes, you could do 23. 22 is here already, so that's void. So you can move it to 25, 26. You can move it all the way around. But what Mr. Garza mentioned about the interest savings, that's another factor to consider too as well. That's all I wanted to say.
Yeah, thank you. And to Councilmember Lofgren's question, and we can show you a different table that shows the conservative approach that we took to create this, which was 1%. And so, for instance, even if next year or the year after that, we have an opportunity to have this conversation again, and even if it isn't an NTAV increase of 8.7%, I mean, even if it's an NTAV increase of 4%, that would still create an opportunity to have the same discussion, because this is all based off of just 1%. Because as you saw on the 5-year table, it's all over the place on what our NTAV ends up being. And so it's appropriate for us to take that 1% approach and simply just take, like we are now, having that annual conversation when the opportunity presents itself. Okay. As you know, I like to present options, and so we do have a couple of options for you related to the property tax rate. This option that we're calling option 2 would still accomplish the goal of redeeming some bonds early to create some debt capacity, just not as much. And so in this particular scenario, that future debt capacity that would be created would be 3.5 million. And you'll see that that means that the tax rate would decrease by a full 3 cents in this scenario. In none of these scenarios do we have any concerns associated with our operations. I just want to throw that out there. With these options, we're really talking about taking advantage of the redeeming of bonds more than anything else.
With this new proposed, with
I'm sorry,
option
go
two-
ahead.
with option 2, would we have to do any adjustments to the proposed budget?
So we would have to make some adjustments in general over the course of the next month, and I have some slides later to kind of highlight some of the things that we'll have to talk about at the next council meeting that will impact how this looks. And so regardless of what we talk about today, I foresee some changes that would impact what the budget looks like. And I'll talk a little bit about that when I talk about the budget calendar and next steps, if that helps at the time.
Because that 3-cent difference would be a savings to the taxpayer.
Correct. And if you wanted to see exactly what that would be, we do have this slide here as well to give you a sense of comparison. And so, for example, same scenario, right, where it's a 6% increase. And so you'll see that, I should have put them all on the same slide so you could see that. But you see the difference. And so, for instance, on the 200,000 option, which is the middle one, you'll see that this option is $10. If I go to this one, it was $24. On the $300,000 side of it, the proposed tax rate is 35 annually, and this option's 14. So.
Okay, and what was the difference in the redemption of the bonds? Because you got 225 here.
Right,
The
so
other one
option,
was-
so option one, which is the proposed, actually takes $500,000
Okay.
to redeem bonds, and that's what helps create 7.5.
Uh-huh.
In this option, it's
It's
collecting less money, so obviously there's less money going towards redeeming bonds. In this case, there would be 225,000, and that's why the debt capacity is 3.5 that's created, and that's why these annual increases go down. And so that's how it's all connected, if you will. Now, there's a third option that really is an opportunity for me to, at minimum, talk about SB2 and a little bit of how the unused tax rate situation would work. Because as you know, under SB2, we do have the ability to go up to a certain percentage. You have carryover tax rates that you could carry over. And so I want to briefly show you, for example, that even under this option 2, that only redeems utilizing 225,000, you'll see the circle there under unused tax rate, which is the 0.0092. So the point in showing you this is to say that under SB2, there is still some capacity there, should council want to maximize revenues under SB2. And what that scenario would look like would be this. And so that's why under this scenario, the circle under unused tax rate is 0, because this is the max. And so because our NTAV is significant compared to previous years, this creates a very not odd, but opportune situation where even if we were to go the max option, it still decreases the tax rate from where we are today. And so the big difference here, which I guess I should have highlighted, is that while the redeemed bonds portion of it would still simply be $500,000 to create that 7.5, the figure that changes is actually the first bullet, property tax revenue increase is 1 million. And so in both other scenarios, that was 662. So that first bullet in both the proposed and in option 2 for general fund is 662,000. And the max option redeems to create 7.5, but the amount going into general fund is 1 million. And so this would obviously create an opportunity to discuss, because we obviously didn't prepare a budget accounting for that 1 million. And so if council wanted to even entertain this, we would have to then work with you to talk about what we do with that extra cash.
Would that be considered only for one-time expenses?
No,
You could use that for ongoing expense? oh,
Correct.
Okay. The same thing for the 662,000?
correct. But the budget that we've put together is already accounting for us receiving that 662,000,
Okay.
but it's definitely not accounting to receive 1 million.
So it would be the difference between the million and the 662,000 that.
Right.
In,
It's a little over 300,000.
okay.
Okay. Now, the action item that comes after we finish this presentation, to be clear, is not a formal vote on the tax rate. The formal votes on the tax rate come later. This is simply an action item for the proposal of the tax rate. And as you may recall, you can always lower it as we go through this exercise over the next month, but it's much harder to increase it. And so that's part of the reason why we propose a tax rate that we do, because we want to create the opportunity to have that discussion with you over the next month about how we might be able to, or why we might need that $7.5 million in debt capacity in the future. But I have a few slides in the later rounds that further explains that. Shifting gears a little bit on the motel tax receipts, I talked about how sales tax rebounds, and sales tax in essence rebounds to pre-pandemic levels. Can't say the same thing about motel tax receipts, and so you'll notice that what we have proposed for fiscal year 22 is 1.7, and you'll see that in 2019 and 2018, we were actually hovering right below 2 million. And so there's still some recovery needed as it relates to hot funds, and so we'll keep an eye on that, and hopefully that continues to increase over time, and hopefully people are traveling around and coming and visiting us, I hope. On the CIP, this is all related to revenue, and so I have more slides on the CIP when I get to the expenditure version of the presentation, but this is in essence to show where the $31.1 million is coming for the CIP. Again, this CIP program that's embedded officially in the budget is the same CIP program that council verbally signed off on in May. And so even though we know that there's some things to talk about, this is strictly has embedded what council signed off on in May, which is a $31.1 million. And I'll hit a little bit more on those projects on the expenditure side of the presentation. Yes, sir.
Go back to the sales tax, where you had the sales tax for all the years. Yeah, that one. I mean, I hope that it comes in at 17.185, but it's like a crystal ball thing. We don't know what's going to happen, and I think that if you look at the previous year, well, previous year's not really good to look at, but if you look at 2020, if it doesn't come in that well.
Right, and fiscal year 20, keep in mind of when the timeline of all this, right? So pandemic really was at the height.
Not gonna be that, I don't know if it's gonna be that big.
So really quickly, Mark, I know you brought up the figure for fiscal year 20. Keep in mind that the pandemic really kicked off in the spring of calendar year 20, so fiscal year 20 that you're looking at, which is a 16.3, is reflective of already having a COVID or a pandemic impact. Yes, sir. Okay. Any additional questions on the slide?
I think what he's talking about is in 2021,
It does.
we have all that stimulus money in there. So, you know.
And that's my only point. There's a lot
Yeah.
of stimulus money.
Correct.
And
Which is why we're proposing 17.1 and not 17.6 or
And it-
17.7 or
Yeah, and
17.8.
it looks like 2019, which I just hope it comes that way, and I hope nothing else happens.
No, that's a good observation, Councilman. But if you recall, the stimulus came in after March when the big dollar. So if you notice the numbers, it's not mimicking, my projections is still conservative even after the March one, because I will take advantage in 21 because I think that money's out there. That's a given. But for 2022, I don't see that happen again. Hope maybe not, but right now it doesn't. Let's go back to 2020. 2020, you had $16 million, but you had a budget of $15 million. So technically, we came in over budget, pretty not bad. But if you go back further to 18, 17, you're still in the $16, $17 million range market. The last comment I would have to say that in 2020, I still feel comfortable right now to this date, as of today. I'm a CPA, I'm qualifying it today because the way this market works down the road, everybody gets scared, it goes to heck. But right now, in 2022 numbers, there's one big assumption that's not incorporated that I hope that will play in our favor that offset any negatives coming down the road, which, as you recall, the state comptroller passed the new.
Right, that's true.
Okay,
That's
so
a good
that is
point.
another ace in the hole that we don't want to play that card yet, because I don't know what the number's going to be. I know it's going to be positive, but again, I'm not going to be too aggressive on that because I don't know what's going to happen the way it's handling right now with the economy. So it's like, well, let that one offset each other, hopefully, and we can still move a little slowly. But that's the logic in that sales track projection.
Thank you, sir.
You have a very good track record, I believe you.
Yeah, seriously.
Just-
He's
just-
qualified. He told you
Just
himself.
get that, the
He's
crystal ball
qualified.
and shake it some more.
You know.
He said he was qualified today, right?
Yeah, yeah. That's right.
Yes, what he said.
Again, this is strictly on the revenue side. And so on the revenue side, we have some grant funds that are coming down. And I want to be clear that the $7.3 million that's in here for fiscal year 22 is for the half that we have not received. For the half that we anticipate receiving right smack in the middle of fiscal year 22, that's what's reflective in that. On the expense side, there's a net increase of $3 million. This is why I made that comment earlier on, because I think it's important for everyone to understand why our expenditure budget is always larger than our revenue budget. And so you see that our expenditure budget is 163. And again, if you're wondering what makes up that $3 million, I've got a slide just for you that summarizes what that $3 million difference is compared to the presentation that you received in June. And similar to the revenues version of this, the star circles reflect the biggest changes. And I'll start on the top right associated with the Environmental Services Fund. We briefly talked about the $1 million contribution towards the Stabilization Fund. That's coming out of a combination of $500,000 general fund, $250,000 Environmental Services Fund, and $250,000 utility fund. And you see that noted on there. You'll also note, and you might see some things on there that might seem mundane or might seem small, but think back to when we presented the Rescue Act fund, where we had suggested utilizing $1.5 million for organizational needs, and we actually ended up decreasing that to $1 million. And so some of those projects that we had originally slated to be paid for by the Rescue Plan Act are actually now incorporated into this budget. And so I'm talking about things, for example, under utility fund, things like the glass window, some of the heaters, the hexagon, a SCADA upgrade. You know, these are small expenditures that we were including in the ARPA funds, but at direction of council and wanting to focus those funds on transformational projects, we pulled out those smaller things and have incorporated them into the budget. The big thing, the big new thing, if you will, it's not really new, but new to the budget, that you're familiar with is the building and the renovation of Fire Station Number 1. That's a project that seems to just never end. And so I was joking with Chief Fox that it's been talked about since after Harvey, right? And it just keeps on trekking. And so that project won't be completed, obviously, in fiscal year 21. And so we want to simply carry it over to fiscal year 22. And so you see that that makes up 1.2 million out of that 1.8 million difference on the general fund side. And again, you'll see the stabilization fund transfer, which the greater amount was out of the general fund. You'll again see at the bottom the $500,000 to redeem bonds to create that $7.5 million capacity that we're recommending. And so that's noted on there. You'll see a circle there for IT, server, and routers. That was another one of those elements that we had included in the Rescue Plan Act under the technology bucket that we ended up pulling out and including on here. And some of the other elements are pretty straightforward. Earlier I mentioned that we, once we went back and scrubbed the budget, we realized that we didn't fully incorporate something into the trial budget, which was our intention to. And one of those specific things that we didn't properly account for in the trial budget was that additional staff for Main Street. You heard Danielle talk about it. I even had it listed when I showed the 8 additional positions. We just hadn't properly accounted for it. And so this corrects that. And you'll notice the difference when I get to the slide that changes from a little over 1.9 to 2 million on the personnel side. Any questions on that? Okay. Again, just showing the same information. On the expenditure side, compared to where we were in 21, it's a $20 million increase. And so this briefly summarizes where that money's coming from. One of the big things that we'll talk about, and we'll have some specific tables on, is the increase in CIP transfer and how that's a historic increase going into the CIP program. And so we'll graphically show that. And that obviously makes up a large amount under the governmental funds piece. And we've talked about having a $2 million pay program for employees, and that's obviously embedded throughout all of the funds that contribute towards an operation. This, again, is just a different version that kind of hits on some of the changes. As you've been accustomed to, what's in red are things that have decreased for fiscal year 22 in comparison to fiscal year 21. And so you'll see how some of those grants are coming off the books because those are completed. And we've added the ARPA grant, which we referred to a little while ago. And so I'll just leave that up there for a second versus going through it line item by line item. If there are no questions on that, we'll move forward. So this is where I start getting into some of the specifics. This slide, when I showed it to you in June, had 1.9 something on it. And if you're wondering, well, why is it 2 million now? Well, that's because now we actually put the Main Street position in there, which was our intention back then. We just had forgot. You'll also notice that one of the changes is on the added positions. And so you notice that at the bottom, we now officially incorporated the 2 grant specialist positions that we plan on funding through the Rescue Plan Act that came out of the verbal support from council when we talked about it. And so we've added that. One of the things that we've also done to try and increase, I guess, the ability to understand what this looks like is that we've really broken down what that $2 million is made up of. And so you'll see that for baseline adjustments, that's $314,000. And then you'll see the phase 1, which was the police and fire pay program that went into effect in January. So you see those amounts, and then you see the total amount of 1.2 for phase 2 of the compensation program that we've talked about. Because we added those 2 grant specialist positions, it does impact our FTE count. In June, we talked about how we were being creative on changing positions to stay around the same FTE count. And so we were at flat 639, but adding those positions, we jump up to 641. And as you met earlier, some of these positions we're rocking and rolling with already, such as the deputy chief position. Okay. Transfer increase. This is simply to show this category because this is one of the large changes in the budget. On the general fund side, that's the CIP. And we'll hit on that here in the next couple slides. So on the general fund side, you've heard me talk about how we're making a historic transfer towards the CIP program. And so this is noted on here. So you could see how this transfer compares to the last 5 years. And so you could see that our $8.2 million transfer from general fund to the CIP program is significantly higher than what we've done in previous years. And this is reflective of course, conversations with you about wanting to address as many streets as possible in the CIP program. And so we're trying to establish and build a budget that is reflective of your priorities, reflective of the priorities of the citizens and the residents of Victoria, which we know is all centered around residential streets. And to that end, the CIP program, which I talked about being a little over $31 million, this is a quick breakdown of what that looks like. And you'll see that on the residential streets portion of it, it makes up roughly 25% of that. And I'm actually going to go through this in a little bit greater detail than I did in June, simply for formality's sakes, since this might be the first time that some folks are tuning into this presentation, and also serves as a good refresher for you, quite frankly, on what's included in the CIP program specifically for fiscal year 22. But before I get to that, we wanted to find a way to graphically show how our investment in residential streets is significantly increasing compared to the last few years. And so in this graph or table, if you will, the darker red is reflective of the investment in residential streets. And so you could see how that portion of the CIP is higher than it's ever been in the last 5 years. A big reason for that is, of course, the fact that we're incorporating a more diverse portfolio, if you will, of street maintenance programs, and trying to find better balance between capital projects, complete reconstructs, and those that don't necessitate that in order to extend their life. And obviously, we went through an IMS study that helped us utilize some data to be able to do that. Really briefly, these are some of the I won't read each one, but these are the projects that are included in the close to $7.7 million residential street program for fiscal year 22. the top ones are obviously associated with large thoroughfares, and the bottom half is associated with a residential street. And in case you're wondering, what are those streets are going to get under residential street? The majority of those are seal coats, Onyx product, that process that seems to be effective and people like here. And so we're doing more of that.
What is the average rating of those streets? Is it in the high 60s or?
I don't know off the top of my head for if you're referring to specifically like these streets. I don't know unless Todd, you have that. Yeah, but we can certainly fail. I'm just kidding.
Okay.
Yeah. So, but we can get it. And if you're interested in even seeing the specifics of each, we're happy to put that together as well. I know we have it because I've seen it. I just don't remember it off the top of my head.
Yeah, because somebody mentioned something about everything's, what is it, west of Moody? At some meeting last night. So I was just wondering.
Okay.
Water Street?
What
No,
about,
but, they were talking about behind Mumu's, so that would be on that side of Moody.
Yeah, west side of
The west side of Moody.
Water Street.
Yeah.
Yes, ma'am?
Water Street, I'm not sure where Victoria Street is, but I know that Water Street is in terrible shape between Bridge or really wherever you come around Deerland Feed. And so is that it, where's Victoria in relation to this? Because it looks like, I mean, do you have this on just a seal coat? It needs much more than that.
That's part of the conversation that we want to have with council at the second meeting in August.
Okay.
Because we do need to have a more specific conversation with you about the work that these streets were recommended to versus what we need to update that recommendation. We still want to tackle these streets, but that specific finished product, we need to have a conversation about. So I don't want to necessarily talk too much about what it might be now, because we need to have a conversation with you about how it might be in the future.
Okay, so in this slide where you have residential street maintenance program, that could be seal coat, that could be.
Absolutely. So that would be
mill and
seal coat, Onyx, that would be mill and overlay.
Okay, it could be.
And we intentionally did not put specifics of which street was mill and overlay and which street was seal
Okay.
coat, because we need to have that conversation with you, because it might look a little different than the time that we shared it in May.
I think I was looking
But what's
at
not
it.
changing is the streets that we want to hit in '22.
Okay. What happened to
There we go.
Tanglewood?
I'm not done. So part of the '22 CIP also includes some thoroughfare streets. And so these are listed on there. Some of these also we need to have a conversation about, but nonetheless, they're in there. I will note that on the Anthony Road project, we left it in there, but that's a project that realistically will probably be delayed because it's important that we get through the Lone Tree residential drainage improvement first, before we go in and they design the Anthony Road improvement. I won't read these one by one, but I wanted it to serve as a refresher for you on what was included for fiscal year '22 in the CIP program. And as I said, we plan on having a workshop with you at the second, or city manager's report, at the second meeting in August, where we can map these out and just have a more robust refresh of everything.
At UHV, is that Ben Wilson?
Yes.
Okay.
Sorry. That's everybody's bad, because I don't know how many eyes saw this and didn't catch that.
All right, I meant to ask you this morning.
That's true. You saw it this morning, too.
Yes, I know. I'm just
Yeah.
as guilty.
J comes before W, that's how I always remember.
Jake, there you go.
You see, so J goes first and then W.
Yeah. Councilman Scott, you mentioned Tanglewood, and so the design of the streets that we have in the 5-year CIP for Tanglewood is included in fiscal year '22, as well as some Sidewood projects and a couple of other projects. I do have a future slide later in the presentation that'll hit on a couple of topics that are part of the reason why we need to have a conversation. But I know that there's interest in revisiting the conversation about Tanglewood as well. And so that's something that we would have to have throughout the month of August.
Good.
On the major grant programs, I really want to digress quite a bit, actually. And you'll notice the even change in presentation, because I really want to hit on a couple of things, because the last time that we hit on the Rescue Plan Act fund for the city, there were some changes that came, and that, quite frankly, we haven't had a chance to talk about publicly, and so I want to digress briefly to talk about it. When we last presented that specific recommendation on how to use the 7.25 that we already have, we actually made a recommendation that totaled $6.8 million. And after feedback from council, we've decreased it to 5.35. That's where we've decreased the organizational needs from 1.5 to $1 million. We've made a couple of other adjustments. So I wanted to publicly kind of come back and officially convey in a public setting that we've decreased that from 6.8 to 5.35 to allow more funds to be on the table, if you will, once we finish some of the studies and we can have a conversation about some of the transformational initiatives. I can tell you that I've started having meetings with some of the nonprofits that submitted projects as well, to try and discern the impact of those projects, to really try and hopefully make a recommendation to you as part of a discussion that we need to have about what's transformational versus not. I realize that that's a policy direction from you, but I also like the idea of us also having a professional recommendation associated with that. And so we're working on that as we speak. I do want to specifically talk a little bit about the $1 million related to organizational needs. You obviously notice that we took out a lot of the little items. Actually, I need to remove that lift station generator, but we took out some of the little items that we had incorporated in there. I want to focus on employee wellness because we have a idea that we would like to get some input from council on. We had originally presented $500,000 for context or for background. We had presented $500,000 for this category, and that at the time was made up of HSA contributions, testing, and if you may recall, something that at the time we had referred to as administration of vaccines. What we'd like to do is to develop an incentive program for employees. As Mayor Bachnight mentioned earlier, the data suggests that the vaccination is the way to go. And we recognize that we're limited in how we can mitigate the spread because of some of the orders that the governor has issued and just other things that are taking place. And so we do want to, in a way, put all of our eggs in the basket of trying to have as many employees vaccinated as possible. And so we have an idea to offer an incentive that could be utilized for an HSA contribution, but only for those that have received the vaccine of an amount up to $500. I received some feedback that maybe the amount could come down to $250. We've also received some feedback coming from the employee side that not every employee that has received the vaccine has an HSA with us. And so that if we focus it on just HSAs, that employee would miss out on the opportunity of receiving that incentive. And so it would be an HSA, but for those that don't have an HSA, it would be something that would be a stipend or some kind that we could give them. And so that is something that is completely new that I want an opportunity to bring up to hopefully get some support or some direction from council on that, because at the end of the day, the Rescue Plan Act funds are yours, and we don't want to go down a path assuming anything. And so if we can digress for another 5 minutes or so on this topic, I would be interested in receiving some feedback.
I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, I know you said it would be an incentive, and I think the deadline was on your email said September the 30th?
So our idea is to obviously try and get as many employees vaccinated as possible as soon as possible. And as a matter of fact, that was an idea from Mayor Bachnight that if we do go down this path, to put a deadline to it, to try and get folks, get it taken care of as soon as possible.
Okay,
And
would
so,
that include the people that have already been vaccinated?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so
Yes,
it goes
ma'am.
back to the beginning?
Correct. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, because I didn't want for them to feel like, okay, they only got like from today to the end of September.
Yeah, we're
and then
definitely we're definitely not gonna reward the late bloomers. The idea is to provide this to those that have received the vaccine at any point.
Okay. Does it include council? For employees?
So I'm not a big fan of incentivizing in this manner. I suggested another method, and it might be more difficult from an HR perspective. Whereas if an employee has been vaccinated and has a breakthrough case of COVID, that they would receive regular pay for those 2 weeks that they're out. And if you're unvaccinated you would have to use sick time, vacation time, and wouldn't necessarily get to keep, your regular pay. And so then you're being rewarded in that way for taking the vaccine. And I think overall, since it's a 10%, 11% breakthrough, it is going to be more cost effective to do it that way.
We looked at doing that at my office and kind of how we deal with staff. I can tell you from kind of a personal standpoint, in regards, if you haven't received the vaccine, then that we're not going to, we did prior, but we've kind of had to make a decision in regards to how do we do this, and kind of along the same lines that you were just talking about, how we're dealing with it.
So you're asking us?
Mr.
Yes.
Garza, do you have any?
I am.
You have a unique perspective of being a city employee, and Ms. Elise too.
I like the incentive program.
Pardon me?
Some type of pay, some type of reward.
Because so many people are using like personal reasons, religious reasons, and other reasons, and, I think the incentive would probably be better than kind of, slapping them in the hand because they didn't go and do it. You kind of have to look at their perspective too. They're not doing it just because, they're being stubborn or whatever. They have reasons, so I don't know that, castigating them, would be appropriate because that was their choice.
I did ask Dr. McNeil yesterday of the cases that he's seen of individuals in the hospital. Does he ever ask about the vaccine? He said, of course, I always ask about the vaccine. I said, well, what's the most common thing or reason why people would come in unvaccinated? And his wasn't personal beliefs or this or that. It's just misinformation. The transmitter was hanging out of the arm after the needle came out. Blood between the vaccinated and unvaccinated person that they saw on the internet were definitely different. It's that type of terrible misinformation. And I kind of joked at the time that, well, maybe we should tell everybody that we put our doses through an EMP, electromagnetic pulse, to kill all that, so we don't have to worry about it. Because that's just as much true as everything else. But I still think it is very personal choice for people.
Yes.
And I don't know that the incentive is going to change that personal choice on that side. One of the reasons that I provided the statistics tonight was to try and show from empirical data that the vaccine does protect you, and show that it does work. And still, I think it's, it's a personal choice to people on whether they want to take it or not. And I respect that, and I don't think we should mandate it or incentivize it or anything else. Everybody needs to take their own personal responsibility for their health and decide whether they want the vaccine or not. And all we can do is provide the information to say, here's the risk if you don't.
To me, it's like, if you're not vaccinated, you could cause the healthcare fund a lot of money. And they pay the same amount for their healthcare as somebody who's vaccinated. To me, in fact, if we had to raise the healthcare fund, I'd want to raise it for people who weren't vaccinated and raise it for people who smoked, because everybody's paying for those people who are, and those are choices. I don't know. I think if you're vaccinated, I think the HSA contribution is a good idea, because those people are going to save us more money than the people that are unvaccinated. I mean, and if it's an incentive, now how do you do it for the people that don't have a health account? Maybe you give them half of what you would put in a health.
Well, it'd just be subject to taxes.
Which it would be.
It would be subject to
Right.
taxes.
Right, that's fine.
If you have an HSA, you can put it into that and it's tax-free.
Right, but you could give half to somebody who didn't belong to the healthcare system instead of, like, say we're gonna put 250 in HSA. You could give them 125. If they're not in the healthcare system, they have to pay the taxes on it. That's their problem.
Because we are self-insured, and the more people that we have in our healthcare
Right.
program, the better.
Right.
And that's a
Exactly.
subtle statement of that as well.
Exactly. But,
Well, I think if we were going down that route, it would just say it's a flat, same amount. Just one's subject to taxes and one's not.
that's true,
I mean,
that's true.
so I'm just consensus-wise, right, because this isn't some vote.
But it would be an incentive if you got in the healthcare plan, you'd get 250
Right.
instead of 150 or 125 or whatever.
I don't think that's going to change anybody
I don't think
to
it's gonna change anybody.
Well, and
jump on the healthcare plan.
And the issue there would be that it's impossible for them to suddenly get into the healthcare plan at this point. But if we do something like this and we ever look at it again, I would be in favor of that difference, because we've already talked about it, that it makes sense. And that's hoping that we never have to do something like this again, but.
Right. So are
a
you
year ago-
suggesting that you're supportive of a program?
Yes.
At his
I'm
numbers, though.
asking Councilwoman Scott.
At 250, and I'm comfortable with 125 if it's not in the HSA.
Well, I
Or
think to
250,
Mayor Bachknight's point, it would be, if we do it, it's better to do it across the board, because then to Mayor Pro Tem Solis's point, then it's coming across as penalizing somebody for not,
Right.
being on our health plan, not having an HSA. And so it's easier for it to just be a flat amount. And either, if you have an HSA, it goes into your HSA, or if you don't, you're subject to
your paycheck.
taxes and go that route.
Well, also, if they're vaccinated, they're less likely, if they get it, to be out for a long period of time. So the whole thing is, we want people to get vaccinated. And
Correct.
I don't know that adding the money is gonna get more people vaccinated, but if it gets a few people vaccinated, to me, it's worth it.
How many do we still have unvaccinated out of
It's
the?
a difficult number to figure out, because we have a pretty good sense of the people that have done it through the clinics that the fire department has put together, but we don't know who's gone and got it at HEB, because we haven't flat out told employees, you need to come report, when you get it, where you got it, that type of thing. Our best guess is half. That my conversation with Chief Fox just last week was our best guess, if we had to guess, was half. Are we still at the guess of half? Yeah.
There's some additional hidden expenses in this. We would be giving people off, and I assume we would pay them when they went to get the shot. We would be giving people off, and we would pay them when they reported to the community center to, according to your plan, when they reported to qualify. I mean, there is some lost work time involved in this program as well, and, it's pennies, it's dollars, but it adds up.
Sure, and that's not a concern for us.
No, but it's a financial,
Right.
it is a financial concession that's also being made in this program, which does raise the cost of the program.
But if they don't get vaccinated, there could be costs associated with that.
Right.
Wait, you could do it during their lunch hour or something where. it
Well, I
wouldn't
would
be,
certainly,
you know.
I didn't mean to cut you off. I would support the incentive program with a $250 mark
And a deadline.
and a deadline.
Yeah, definitely a deadline.
I hear consensus for 250, deadline is September 30th, and offered to new employees after September 30th.
Understood, got it. For a second there, I thought I was gonna have to be the tiebreaker.
For how long?
Yeah, and the new employees, like a 2-month window?
2 months after employment is what.
Yeah, I'll talk to Cheryl about what makes sense in that regard to new employees. Okay, well, thank you for going on that journey of digressing on that topic. I think it was a worthwhile conversation as we try and, quite frankly, strengthen the resiliency of the health of our organization. I do think that our organization is different than others because we do offer critical services such as police and fire and others. And so I don't think that it's as simple as simply, it's different for administrative folks that can work from home, or things of that sort. But we have a lot of critical positions with public safety, garbage pickup, public works, where they have to come to work. And so that increases the responsibility that we have to ensure that people can come to work. Because if not, then it impacts our ability to deliver that service. And so thank you for the support in our effort to try and be better at that. So going back to the budget, and I think I owe Thomas lunch because I went over the hour already. But I won't spend too much time on this because you're familiar with it already, but just at a high level, you know that we went through a compensation study with public sector personnel consultants, and that timeline really started January of 2020. That's been a slow but steady process because the study, contrary to popular belief, that study included more than just simply looking at comparisons of compensation. That's updating job titles, FLSA classifications, updating job descriptions, really just revamping our entire structure for the entire organization, something that hadn't taken place since the 80s. And so it was important for us to do that. Phase one was something that we implemented in January earlier this year, and that was the police and fire step program. And so this is a continuance of that. Back in fiscal year 21, council had approved $350,000 for that program, but we actually ended up, because we started in January, actually committing ourselves to a little over $500,000 for that first phase. And so the reason why we've included it, as if you're seeing it for the first time in the fiscal year 22 budget, is to be transparent with that process. But in any case, we adjusted that. And then phase two, as you know, is the big one, which is the $1.2 million that we have new cash in fiscal year 22. That process communicated to us that from civilian employees across the organization, we had 60% that were below market average and minimums and whatnot. And so that program is intended to bring everybody back up to minimum. I'm going to kind of fly through this. But in essence, as it relates to specifically that 1.2, because that's the big one in fiscal year 22, that impacts a significant amount of employees. We forecast that that'll impact close to 300 employees, that $1.2 million. Part of that will increase our minimum wage officially from $11 an hour to $13 an hour. This is something that we think is important, especially just in the competitive market. That just everybody's trending towards the concept of a living wage. And I recognize that $13 an hour is probably still not a living wage in Victoria, but we are trending in that direction with this program. We're also cognizant of the fact that not every employee will see an increase, because there was 40% of employees that were already making above the minimum of the market data per the study. And so those employees will not be officially impacted by the pay program, but there are some employees within that we did impact as part of the baseline adjustment. So for example, telecommunication operators, we went ahead and we increased their pay back in January in order to be competitive because of the vacancies that they were doing or that they had. And so rather than waiting until October 1 to be able to increase that pay for telecommunication operators, we went ahead and did that in January. And there's a few other examples just throughout the organization. Obviously, there's a lot of movement when people transition in and out that changes how much that position pays. Because oftentimes the market and just the process sometimes just puts us in a position where we have to pay better for a new person coming in just to be able to get them on board and recruit them and whatnot. And so in any case, officially there are some positions that won't see an increase, but unofficially there are some positions that still saw a benefit thanks to the study, and that will continue to be a benefit through turnover in trying to tackle those issues. I do feel proud of the fact that if approved, this program would, for the first time ever, more than likely, have all 641 employees with the organization making minimum of market. And that's not something that the city has ever been able to confidently say, because now we have the data to back that up. And so and to be clear, I'm not suggesting that our employees are simply worthy of the minimum of what they should be paying, because obviously we have employees that are definitely worthy of getting paid more than the minimum. But I do think it's a step in the right direction. So we're very excited about what the future holds as it relates to our compensation program, because this isn't something that we plan on doing one and done. This is something that we hope that we continue to get your support in the coming years. And to that end, in fiscal year 23, and sort of, crystal ball to the future, we know that, again, there were some folks that did not see a pay increase. And so we would want to be sensitive to that, because some of these individuals would not have had seen an increase in, by the time we get to fiscal year 23, 4 or 5 years. And so we want to be sensitive to that. In terms of priority levels, we know that with police and fire, we need to also work on moving them to the appropriate step. You may recall that when we updated the STEP program for police and fire, we simply moved them to the closest step that they were at, but it still creates a compression issue where you might have, somebody here for 5 years making as much as somebody that starts tomorrow. And so we want to make sure that moving forward, we're sensitive to that and can really appropriately place our personnel where in that STEP program their experience and knowledge and whatnot earns them to be. Now, that isn't something that's just a challenge with police and fire, but it makes it a little bit easier to tackle because of the formalized step structure that they have. But generally speaking, again, we have employees throughout the organization that might be on an hourly spectrum or salaried that, could, based on their experience and whatnot, be further along that spectrum. And so we want to be sensitive to all that moving forward. Any questions on that? Kind of tried flying through that. On the health fund, this is pretty straightforward. This is simply just to show you a nice picture to show you that our ending working capital balance is on the up. That's the red line. And so this is good news for us because, as you know, over the course of the last 5 years, there's been a lot of talk about making changes to that. You may recall last year we increased our contribution by $1 million to be more sustainable with the annual amount going into the health fund, and that's playing a big role in the reason why we're seeing that working capital balance increase. Because the reality is, before we just did not have enough money going in compared to how much was coming out, and so that's why that red line was trending downward. And so we reversed that. So that's good news because it means that we can keep the same rates that we have currently for employees because we're not feeling that pressure that we were feeling historically speaking. Really quickly, the budget with the infamous budget wheel. And so this is simply to show you a comparison of the fiscal year 21 budget compared to fiscal year 22. There's been one change to this, to the version that you saw in June. In June, we did not identify the CIP as a different piece of the pie. We had included that in Public Works, and so it looked kind of weird because it looked like Public Works' budget was increasing significantly. Some of the feedback and conversations that I've had with Mayor Bachnight are trending us to being more visual and being more intentional with how we show operating budgets just over the years, if you will, as opposed to kind of lumping some of these one-times together. And so we're trying to be better at that, even just with this example. And so, for example, Public Works, you see that in fiscal year 21, they were at they were 12%. And so you see how that, the percentage-wise goes down, but the money goes from 5.91 to 5.95. And so that's really more of an apples-to-apples comparison related to the operation by pulling out the CIP that we had included in June. We also have the addition of the stabilization transfer and the fire station project. So that's the other big difference there on the right. Okay. I'm going to fly through the rest of these because I know we're already taken up too much of your time probably. But in any case, similar to the previous slides, this is just for the governmental revenues, and so this is just another representation of that change. It's a $9 million increase in the governmental funds compared to fiscal year 20, and you could see how in the general fund, that's the $1.3 million. And this is just another slide that goes into greater detail talking about what that $9 million is made up of. On the expenditure side for governmental funds, that goes up $13 million. And so again, this kind of attempts to summarize what that is. You'll see a lot of consistent terms thrown out there: pay program, CIP transfer, stabilization fund transfer, fire station 1, use redeeming of the bond program, reduction of grant funds because we had some grants that came off the books. So you'll see those consistent themes just spread out throughout. We just choose to show it in different ways, if you will, so you can see specifically where it is in the budget. It's just another way to show that. I won't spend too much time on the enterprise funds, but we do have some slides to illustrate what that looks like. I know that we focus a lot of time on the governmental, but obviously we do have a utility that we operate and an environmental services fund, and so we want to be sensitive to that and to see how there is a $5 million increase here. And so you'll notice that that's mainly due to the CIP as well. That's the big ticket item. If you're wondering what that COVID transfer is that eliminated, that's related to the first CARES Act, if you will, and some of the things that we did at the time with that initial money. That seems like forever ago, that initial CARES Act and when that came through. Again, just a different way to showcase that. If I'm going too fast, just slow me down, please. Do you want me to slow down? Faster? Faster. Got it.
He already knows what's coming.
Yeah. Okay. Enterprise funds, you get it. I'll just fly through it because this is important. So on the budget calendar, on the consent agenda, you also approve the budget calendar of the hearings. And so I want to walk through that really briefly. Today, we obviously did all of those things. At the next regular council meeting, we'll have a budget work session where we intentionally want to talk about the CIP, but obviously we'll talk about anything else that you want to talk about associated with the proposed budget as well. We incorporated a special council meeting on Tuesday, the 24th. Should it necessitate an additional conversation with council? Either way, regardless of whether we meet that day or not, staff would need that extra time in between the 17th and the 31st to update the budget, should it necessitate updating prior to an official vote on the 31st. So that's why we spread out the calendar the way that we did. And again, we do envision some potential changes to the CIP, and so we would need that time to adjust everything. So that come August 31st, I promise, a very simplified version of this presentation that is fully reflective of whatever changes come about over the next month. And that on the 31st, by the way, would be the first official vote on the tax rate. And so again, today's action after this presentation is simply just to get the clock going. And at the 31st meeting, we could stay with the one that gets approved tonight, or it could get lowered, but it can't go higher because then it starts a whole clock all over again. And so that's why we always want to go in higher at this point in the process and then just work our way down. And then ultimately September 7th, which is a regular council meeting, would be the final adoption of everything. Now, I didn't put any pretty pictures because I don't have time, but some of the things that we need to talk about at the second meeting in August are related to the Fire Station Number 1 project. We talked about how we have $1.2 million for that. Now that the architect's involved and some of that pricing is more accurate and up to date, there's a lot of cost of materials and labor and things of that sort that are increasing the cost of the fire station project. And so we'll need to talk to you about that. There's some drainage needs that we've come to realize based off of some of the recent rain events and even based off of some of the preliminary data that we have from the drainage master plan. And so we want to start having that conversation with you, mainly because of the immediate needs that we see. And hopefully you recall some of the pictures that I sent you on some of the areas of concern that we have there. On the residential street program, you heard Councilwoman Scott talk about revisiting the phased approach to Tanglewood. But we also want to have a conversation about the M&S engineering study report. For further, I guess, explanation to that, the IMS study, which simply just looked at the surface of the streets, not looked at the base, at least not of all residential streets, because it would have been too expensive for us to do that. And it makes more sense to look at that the year before you're going to fix the street versus investing a bunch of money, paying for a study of a base for a street that you're not going to get to 5 years that you're going to have to retest anyway. And so what Ken and his team did was that they hired M&S Engineering to look at the base for the streets that we have in the CIP for 22, and even some of the ones for 23. And so we need to have a conversation with you about the results of that, because that would lead to a different recommendation on the application needed on that particular street. And so we want to be transparent with you on that. And so we'll do that as well. And we want to have a conversation about potentially adding some streets, because we are just a few streets away from being able to include 25% of our worst streets in Victoria in the CIP over the next 5 years. So currently we're at 23%. Worst streets for us would be streets that were identified as rating under below a 40. And so we think it's an opportunity for us to be more intentional with a goal of 25. And so we just want to have a conversation about that. The last one, sports facility improvements. This is related a little bit to soccer, because part of what's included in the sports facility improvement that we want to talk to you about is related to parking at the soccer complex, and us necessitating maybe some adequate investment in that to make it look nice and make it appropriate. But we also want to have a conversation about Riverside Stadium. You've heard us talk about how the 75th anniversary of Riverside Stadium is right around the corner. And we're also hosting the state TAF tournament. Did I say that right, Mike? Yes. Thank you. In the spring. And so there are some improvements, minor, that we want to do to Riverside Stadium in preparation for that. And so we want to just generally have a conversation with you about that, because if we add it, it would be part of the CIP. And so if any of that alters what we've presented officially today, then it would necessitate us changing the budget in time for the meeting on the 31st.
Would you go back to the calendar?
Yes.
In the past, we've always kind of split some of the votes on the budget and the tax rate from each other. I always thought it was an odd arrangement, but sometimes we'd be on the second vote on the budget, but only the first vote on the tax rate, or the other way around. I just want to make sure that there wasn't a reason for that, and that it's okay to do it this way, because it's different than we've done in the past.
Yes, ma'am, it is different than the way we've done it in the past. Early in the budget cycle this year, I sat down with Laura Gonzalez, and we actually went over this process to make sure that this simplified version of the budget calendar would still comply with all of the state regulations, while making it easier for both council and members of the public to understand where we are in the process.
That I'm all for that, but I just didn't want us to get this approved and then halfway through August realize that we needed to.
Well, you already approved the budget calendar on consent, so.
Right. I know.
Just on August 31st, will canvass votes?
Yes. Actually.
21st is the election.
Yeah, I don't remember off the top of my head. April, the canvassing of the runoff, are we doing that on the 31st? Yes, 31st. Yes. So 31st would be the canvassing and the swearing in.
The swearing in would be on September 7th, the first regular meeting after the canvass.
Okay.
Welcome to council. We've already approved the budget.
So the first official council meeting of the new council member will be voting on the budget. So that'll be a doozy. So, and all jokes aside, whoever comes up victorious in that election, I would obviously meet with in general, but obviously meet with specifically to take a deep dive into the budget to make sure that hopefully that individual is as prepared as possible to make a decision. And of course, that'd be up to them if they want to actually vote or abstain or whatever. I mean, that would be up to them. But obviously, I'll do my part to ensure that they're as prepared as possible leading up to that.
We will too.
Thank you for that.
Yeah, absolutely. And then just some things to keep in mind. So again, like I talked about, the compensation program isn't a one and done. We want to keep that going. We want to continue keeping an eye on the health plan because it is trending in the right direction. And so that might create some opportunities in the future, not now, but in the future. The CIP program we've hit on. One of the things that I want to mention too is that we have a lot of master plans in the works. And so we do plan on working with April on scheduling 2 budget workshops with council, like the ones that we do at the community center, one in September and one in December. So the one in September be focused on presentations related to master plans. And then the one in December, of course, be the continuation of CIP. And then, of course, anything else that you may want to talk about. But keep that in mind as you just think about and reflect on the tax rate, because we do have a lot of things that are coming, which is why we proposed the tax rate that creates as much debt capacity as possible, which is that additional 7.5. And with that, I'm happy to answer, any questions that you might have.
Did you say you wanted for us to give you an idea of which tax rate you wanted to go, we
Well,
wanted to go with tonight or not?
When Mayor Bognac calls back item E4,
Okay.
you'll actually officially vote on a resolution that would pick a tax rate, which would be the tax rate that we would continue conversations about. And as I've mentioned, it's a resolution to kick off the process. And I know it's a technicality, but technically the first vote on the tax rate officially would be on the 31st.
I have a question.
Yes, sir.
I was gonna wait, but, on motel tax, if I book a room on Expedia, and where does the money, the motel tax go? Does it go to the location? Or does it go to a central place in Texas right now? Now, I know the sales tax is gonna change, but where does, if I book on Expedia, do we get if I book a hotel on Expedia, do we get that hotel motel tax?
Supposed to.
The short answer is yes.
Yeah.
Several years ago, there was some uncertainty about that. There was a large lawsuit that took place with several cities involved, led by the city of San Antonio, against several of the booking agencies, and that all got resolved. And it is, as we understand it currently today, that money is being remitted back to the localities.
And we're having an audit of our sales tax.
Correct.
Is that gonna include motel tax?
No, that's separate. So separately, and we've already done it. So this, unlike the sales tax where we had never done an audit of that kind, the city has done audits on hotels, but they're completely different because audits on hotels are individualized. And so it's not feasible or realistic to audit all hotels at once. And so typically you take turns auditing hotels, because that actually is a process where somebody goes in and compares their information that they're required to report to the state with their own books. And it's a very more extensive process to determine, if some of that reporting is not accurate. But we already do that. Now, what element of that does it include? Expedia, I'm not sure. But that audit process does compare their occupancy rates as they report them with the money that gets remitted. So that would identify any discrepancies if they existed.
When they're audited, are there differences noted?
Gilbert would be more intimately familiar with that part.
Yes, so they're also noted. And also another thing to do, they take a deep dive into state reporting too as well to reconcile back to everything else. Because even though Expedia might not, for some reason, they don't send it money to the city, they still have to report to the state with the hotels, because they won't send the money to the hotel. Hotel will still report to the state, and that is reconciled back to individual city itself.
But when you've done these audits, you found differences?
The biggest difference that when we get hit, they get penalized is because of the number of days. When somebody stay there and over certain days, it's not necessarily a tax anymore.
Right.
And so that is one of the discrepancies that we have, and that's more of an education deal than anything else. Does that answer your question? Yes. And they do give a final report. I'd be happy to, from now on, I'll just submit it as a re-file once the audit is complete.
Okay, thank you.
That was an hour and 30 or 24 minutes. Nope.
Thank you.
I'm
I
sorry,
appreciate
29
it.
minutes.
I appreciate it.
Compared to what?
It was a bunch of great information, though, Mr. Garza. I appreciate you taking the time to put that presentation together and continue informing us. All right, at this time, we'll go back to
I'll take
item
the credit.
E4. Ms. Hilbrick?
Item E4 is a resolution proposing the tax rate, scheduling public hearings, and scheduling a vote to adopt the tax rate for fiscal year 2021-2022.
Do you wish to make a motion?
Make a motion to approve E4.
I second it.
Okay, to be clear, we are talking about which option?
Right,
The proposed,
then I'd like to.
58.82?
so the motion is for
5882.
proposed .5882 on the tax rate, and we got a motion and a second on that. Is there any discussion about it?
I'd like to discuss, because this is the time to set it, to give ourselves the most flexibility. And I'm in favor of setting it at the voter approved rate of .5974, which is the max we can go to without going to the voters. I don't know how anybody else feels.
I can tell you how I feel. I don't see myself ever voting for that one. I
I'm not
want
happy
to
about that.
recognize that we are still in a kind of flexible state with COVID, and it can affect people mightily in their pocketbooks and property tax wise. I don't want to go down to the, the effective tax rate or no new tax rate.
No new revenue tax rate?
No new revenue tax rate, thank you. Because for so many years, we have done that, and I think in the long run, it's hurt us. I think this proposed one is fantastic, and that it gives us greater flexibility 2 years down the road for just a small amount of increase this time. And we don't get any really, the way it's set up, we don't get an additional, a debt capacity by going to the full rate. We end up with $338,000 extra dollars to spend, however. And I want to recognize that we're not going all the way down, but.
We're not going all the way up either, is what you're saying.
Yeah, and that's my thought on it. I don't know how y'all feel, but.
Exactly.
I feel the same way.
I feel that, we have to take into consideration the other taxing entities. And, if we go to the max and everybody decides to go to the max, we're going to be taxed out. So I'd rather go with the proposed.
Hopefully they take into account us as well.
Well, I understand, but see, we're considerate.
I know.
We're very considerate. And I think that's why we've always gone with the no tax rate, the no revenue tax rate, because we always, we're thinking about everybody else, but in the long run, it's the taxpayer that, we should be thinking about. So I think it's fair.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, the county for years stayed with their existing tax rate and just let it go up instead of kept dropping it like we did.
Yeah.
But
We still have a tremendous amount of services to provide to our citizens, and hopefully they appreciate it, but the .5882 is what I'm comfortable with.
all right, well, thank you. If there's no further discussion, call for a vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? Thank you.
Mayor, I was just going to mention that there is no need to meet an executive session.
Thank you.
Those topics can be pushed out.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Well, with that great news, we will adjourn.